Chapter 1451–1475 Supremacy Games 1451 Return to the Promised Land. Some time later, beneath the rippling surface of a vast artificial lake in the northern district, an ancient mansion lay hidden from the world above. Its grandeur spoke of bygone eras, with ornate carvings gracing its stone walls and aged statues standing sentinel at every corner. Lush aquatic plants clung to its surface, adding a touch of nature to its grand design. Light refracted through the water, casting shimmering patterns across its facade, making it seem like the mansion was alive and breathing. Felix and his party were seen standing at its grand entrance. A massive gate decorated with intricate marine motifs stood ajar. "It's beautiful," Kara remarked as she gazed around her with an odd look. As expected, only ethereal elders were deserving of this greatness. Sekiro commentated, sharing the same reaction as Kara. Ka-thum. Just like it sensed their existence, the gate opened widely, presenting them with a long tube-like glass corridor, showing myriads of aquatic creatures swimming around. "Let's go." Felix walked in and was followed by his servants, whose eyes never stopped darting everywhere. "Welcome to my humble abode." Suddenly, a hearty laughter resounded from the end of the corridor, and when Kara and Sekiro saw its source, their legs almost gave in from shock. Elder Kraken came personally to greet them. Much appreciated over the invitation. Felix nodded politely even if his face didn't display it. Somewhat nervous, Sekiro and Kara did the same without opening their mouths, not daring to be out of line in front of one of the highest authoritative beings in the spirit realm. "Let me give you a short tour and show you your rooms," Elder Kraken said, walking in front of them. "I knew that Sir has a deep connection with the Elder, but it seems much more intimate than I expected it." Sekiro's heart turned a bit light. Are we finally going to stay away from trouble? Sekiro couldn't imagine Felix falling in more trouble now with the backing of Elder Kraken. Alas, one could only pray for his poor soul. On the same northern district, but tens of kilometers to the southern side, Boss Alves was seen in Duke Humphrey's office again. "Duke, I have completed my mission, the targets have been kicked out to the streets again," Boss Alves reported. "Unless he becomes a golden spirit, he will be there for a long time." Boss Alves didn't forget that Felix had some sort of connection with Elder Kraken. However, after everything that happened, and Felix hadn't relied on such a connection, he started to doubt if it was even a close one. He had no idea that Elder Kraken was holding back only because Lord Hades ordered him to not break the rules for the sake of carrying favor with Isna. Now, that Felix had become a golden spirit, he could help him with whatever as long as he respected the rules. Unresponsive, Duke Humphrey merely waved a finger and a holographic screen appeared in front of Boss Alves. When Boss Alves saw its content, his eyeballs almost fell from their sockets from shock. "It can't be. How?" he exclaimed, his face practically touching the screen. His reaction was understandable as the screen showed Felix with a golden hue, entering Elder Kraken's massive property with his servants behind him. "Congratulations, you have kept them on the streets for a couple of minutes," Duke Humphrey said calmly. "Is this your definition of success?" I will fix it." Boss Alves' heartbeats accelerated in fright even when Duke Humphrey didn't seem either furious or disappointed. He understood that Duke Humphrey almost never showed his emotions, making it impossible to predict his next action. "There is nothing for you to fix," Duke Humphrey stated. "As long as they are under Elder Kraken's protection, no one can touch them unless they broke the rules. You're done. But leave." With that final order, Duke Humphrey twisted his chair to face the window, completely ignoring Boss Alves' existence. Boss Alves opened his mouth many times wanting to defend himself or find a way to make amend and get the Duke's favor, but each time he ended up closing it back. He realized that anything he uttered would do nothing but to piss off the Duke even more. So, he turned around and walked away, his heart still beating out of his chest in distress and agitation. What's going to happen to me? Will he cast me away? Will he find a way to ruin my business? He holds all the cards. During his journey back home, Boss Alves' thoughts were nothing but negative about his future. He ought to feel this way as the Duke had him sign a strict contract that would ensure he would never sell him out or his fallen spectre's operation regardless of what he did to him. He won't throw me away, I am still producing manpower for Sharky's operation. Boss Alves narrowed his eyes coldly. Now, if I want to get back in his favor, I have to be more proactive in the fallen spectre's operation whether I want to or not. Boss Alves realized that his only path to redemption was to join the dark forces willingly and start actively helping them instead of forced, either this or his business might disappear tomorrow after a raid of law enforcers deciding to come for a random inspection. Back in the office, Duke Humphrey was seen tapping a finger on his elbow, deep in his thoughts. Why is Kraken helping that boy? Is it because of that rowdy Unigen? If he seeks validation or favor from her by doing this, he will receive nothing but the irk of Lord Hades. Now that he knew the identity of the ethereal elder backing Felix, things had gotten much easier for him to analyze. Elder Kraken isn't known to be that ambitious. He is ranked at the bottom of the council and he never showed an ounce of interest in climbing the ladder. So, what's all this about? Duke Humphrey was left utterly confused as he saw no benefit in assisting Felix unless he wanted to invest in him and make him one of his subordinates. That boy did show a remarkable performance, he will be a great asset in the government under him. Duke Humphrey began to see this as the true motive behind Elder Kraken's involvement. Such a pain in the ass. Duke Humphrey sighed and dropped the matter for now, knowing that he could not make any more moves on Kura without drawing Elder Kraken's attention to his business. The last thing he wanted was an ethereal elder snooping on him in such a crucial period. It's time to accelerate the expansion. I have to have more than 40% of spirits as fallen by the end of the decade. Duke Humphrey narrowed his eyes as he stared at the stars. For my ascension, for my return to the promised land, I have to fulfill my promise. A couple of hours later, back in Elder Kraken's mansion. So that's how it went. Elder Kraken uttered with a deep tone, I didn't want to approach Carbuncle due to the strict rules keeping us away from the scribe's private life, but I can offer my assistance through you. Felix had just narrated everything that happened between him and Carbuncle, hoping to ask for his help in bringing Carbuncle's wife back in his arms. Much acknowledged, Elder, without you, it won't be possible. Felix bowed his head in gratitude. While he owed Carbuncle a favor, Elder Kraken had nothing to gain from this. In fact, he would put himself in danger since the plan in Felix's mind would make him tread on the line of breaking the rules. It's nothing, I consider Carbuncle as a friend. Elder Kraken mentioned. Felix paused for a moment before asking, is it possible to help Carbuncle link with his wisp of consciousness? It feels off to know that another version will live in loneliness while the other will have a chance to rejoin with his wife. I never tried it so I wouldn't know, but it can't be easier than doing it by yourself. Elder Kraken shook his head. I see. Plus, why do you care about such a thing? Carbuncle's wisp of consciousness wouldn't hesitate to erase himself if he listened that his main consciousness had reunited with his wife. That's reasonable. Knowing the drug addict Carbuncle, he would do exactly that as his entire purpose of existing in the living world was for the sake of his wife. You told me that she is under Warden Sharky. I will try to reach out to him and see if it will be possible to purchase her as a new servant. Elder Kraken suggested. If it was that easy, the elder wouldn't have told me to join the government. Felix shook his head, there is something off about that man and if you approached him for her sake, there is a high chance he will reject you and be on alert. It's your mission, you know best. Elder Kraken shrugged his shoulders, just ask and I will help. For now, do you know any available positions in the government that will allow me to pressure even officials? Felix asked. I think the Law Enforcers Department chief communicated about an opening for a squad captain's position in the upcoming 2 months. Elder Kraken informed, it's the highest current open position and it will be immensely difficult to obtain it. 1452 Report on the Living World's situation. A position for captain. Felix raised an eyebrow in surprise. It's possible for golden spirits to aim for it straight away, jumping through being a law enforcer first. It used to be impossible before to skip governmental ranks, but since there were barely any openings released in each decade, we decided to alter the rules a bit and give a chance to golden spirits to target any free post. Even if it's an ethereal elder post. Elder Kraken shook his head. However, being given a chance and getting the post are two different things entirely. Everyone else fails in the qualification stage, and even if they made it, it was near impossible for the veteran officials to let newbies steal such a well-deserved promotion from them. In fact, ever since this systematical change was introduced, there was a single golden spirit who managed to excel above governmental officials and steal the post from their hands. Just one. Felix didn't like those odds one bit. For the captain position, you will be competing against veteran law enforcers who were in the force for centuries or even millennium if they weren't lucky with a direct promotion. Elder Kraken informed. No wonder no one makes it past them. Felix frowned. He understood that the captain's position examination would definitely include many subjects related to law enforcement rules and antics in the heavenly plane. Those law enforcers had plenty of experience on the field, making them the perfect candidate for the position, unlike the newbie gold spirits, who had merely touched the surface. You should still participate. I can recommend you, helping your resume become highly qualified to be accepted. Elder Kraken shared, whether you succeed or not, the experience will be a useful tool. Plus, if you failed and a law enforcer received the post, his spot would be freed, giving you another opportunity to join the government. Its examination would be much simpler, and with your experience, you would pass it with flying colors. My thoughts exactly. Felix nodded in agreement. Right now, Felix just wanted to join the administration regardless of the position available, so he could secure the reincarnation opportunity. All governmental officials were given the opportunity and they had the right to cash it out any time they wanted. However, no one actually goes for it, as it was deemed to be the worst decision anyone could make. After all, what's the point of getting reborn with no memories just to end up dying again and becoming a wandering spirit? This time, they wouldn't even make it to the heavenly plane, don't even mention the well-established government. You should put your resume as fast as possible. Right now, the news hasn't gone public, allowing your resume to be seen first instead of getting buried in a mountain of paperwork. Elder Kraken advised. Upon hearing this, Felix brought out a holographic paper and began working on his resume, adding on all of the details that could help him stand out from the rest. Unfortunately, because he and Miss Sani were too shady, most of the cases closed ended up not going to court after getting paid shush money. So, Felix couldn't include Mr. Azravan's case and many others in it. Knowing this would make his CV appear empty, Felix included his achievements in the Heavenly Plains tournament, not forgetting to write about defeating Nebula and blowing half of the Colosseum. Elder Kraken's eyelids twitched after seeing him write it down, but he remained silent. He understood that the legal enforcement department valued strength, integrity, loyalty, and mortality above everything. Strength came first for a reason, as their jobs were pretty demanding in this department. Oh, you also received a recommendation letter from an enforcer's captain? That's even better, as recommendations from the same hiring department meant a lot more. Elder Kraken expressed. I didn't think it would come in handy so soon, Felix replied while finishing the last touches. After he was done, he included Elder Kraken's endorsement letter in the file as he wrote it down almost instantaneously for him. Then, he emailed it to the Legal Enforcement Department's main headquarters responsible for the entire realm. Now, pray for the best and start preparing for the examination. Elder Kraken said. Is it possible to know what will be on the examination? Felix inquired. Unfortunately, all governmental officials are banned from discussing examination details with citizens unless they were their servants. I see. Albeit unfortunate, Felix already had a pretty good idea of how the examination was going to be. By the way, is it possible to talk to my masters? Felix inquired telepathically. Sure, what do you want to say? Elder Kraken permitted. I just want to know how things are going in the living world. Are my friends fine? Is the Alliance doing well? Nemo too. What about Saurus and Wendigo, are they looking for me? While Felix's heart might have become as cold as glacial rock, he still wanted those close to him to be free of trouble. I can answer most of your questions. Elder Kraken said, it's been over 2 decades now since your death's anniversary in the living world. I don't know much about that little elf as she has sealed herself in her territory, but the Ice Wolf and the Plant Cutie have managed to uplift the human race's rank to the top 12 by dominating the racial games platform. It seems like Fenrir's student is aiming to become the Grand Supreme and fill the void you left behind. Right now, he is ranked in the top 10 and pushing the ranks slowly after he started his individual journey on the platform. With Elder Fenrir at his side and the death of most of the strongest fighters in the Alliance, I can see it happening. Felix nodded. Who's the current Supreme Leader? It's Hive Guardian N0. Elder Kraken said, he became the number 1 by default. It means the Hive race has 2 votes now. Felix frowned, what's Candace doing? Why hasn't she made the Ruiner climb the ladder and secure the Grand Supreme position? Felix believed that Noah had the potential to become number 1, but when it came to the Ruiner, he was certain that he would become 1 if he joined the platform. Candace and the entire Void Nation aren't doing so good now. Elder Kraken shook his head, with your death being announced at last by the Alliance, no one had taken it harder than the Void Nation. Even the human race managed to bounce back quite swiftly, but the Void Nation almost fell apart. It's because of Nemo. Felix sighed. Yes, you were the heart of the Void Nation, and with you Inasna's death, Nemo listened to absolutely no one, not even us. Elder Kraken smiled wryly, we tried to keep him around with us, but he took off on his own somewhere and it has been a long while since we heard from him. Since all the Void Nation citizens had wisps of consciousness inside Nemo's mind, he was capable of commanding them regardless of the whereabouts of their main consciousness. This meant that even Candace had absolutely no control over the Void Nation citizens if Nemo wanted them to do something. Fortunately, Candace keeps us updated on his condition as she was the last person he somewhat still listens to. It sounds dire. Felix wasn't loving the news so far. At least, we still have his alter ego sealed in the sun earrings. After you died, none of us could access the sealed dimension, but we still feel his alter ego's life force burning strong. He must be slumbering to save energy. Elder Kraken mentioned. That's good. The last thing Felix wanted was for Nemo to seek a merge with his alter ego for the sake of getting stronger and reviving him. As for the Darkins, they have been quiet ever since your death was confirmed, hiding in some corner away from civilization. Elder Kraken said. I see. All in all, Felix was somewhat pleased with the current state. Sure, there were some problems, but nothing seemed too life-threatening, which gave him a bit of relief. All you have to do is focus on yourself here. Elder Kraken frowned. If you think Lord Hades is going to sit back and watch you get revived with your current powerful soul and memories, you are gravely mistaken. Nothing else matters if you can't return to the living world, so focus on just that and leave the rest to us. I understand. Now, is there anything else you want to say to your masters? No need. Felix uttered calmly, I will talk to them when I have some results to show. Knowing that his masters weren't of the sentimental type, Felix decided to speak with them after he entered the administration at least. Otherwise, it would be nothing but an empty chit-chat, and none of them liked such a thing. 1453 The Qualification Stage. 2 months later. Felix could be seen sitting on the floor of his room, leaning his back against his bed while having a holographic letter in front of him. You got accepted, Master. Kara cheered happily as she eyed the acceptance letter to participate in the upcoming captain's post-examination. Only 10 golden candidates were accepted with you. Sekiro said with a stern tone, I heard that more than 100 golden spirits had filled their resumes. The competition sure is cutthroat right from the start. Without the elder's recommendation, it's doubtful if I would have been accepted too. Felix nodded. A direct recommendation from an ethereal elder was enough to move mountains, and if Felix wasn't picked, it was the same as challenging the elder's judgment. The examination will begin in 2 days. Sekiro asked, have you prepared enough? We will see in 2 days. It didn't take long before the day of the examination had arrived. Since such examinations were held in secrecy, only the accepted ones were given the exact location and time. Felix had arrived at the location half an hour earlier, just to find that all of the accepted golden spirits were already waiting there. The location was one of the many halls inside the law enforcement building. When he entered it, all eyes switched to him, each showing a different reaction to his arrival. Felix recognized only 2 candidates in the group, they were Nebula and Ravager. The rest were total strangers who he had never heard about. Traveler. Nebula called Felix's name while gritting her teeth, giving him the most menacing death glare she could muster. What's up? Felix replied casually, like there was no bad blood between them. I won't forget the humiliation you put me through in our last fight, Nebula remarked, her tone as icy as ever, making everyone understand that she meant it from the heart. Cool. Felix gave her a slight head nod and walked to Ravager. When he reached him, he asked calmly, you are also interested in becoming a captain? Yes. Ravager replied, his expression much colder than usual. Felix could see that he had a new murderous glint in his eyes, which made him wonder what happened to him after he won the tournament. Still, he kept his curiosity to himself and wished him good luck before picking an empty spot to sit in. Bastard. Meanwhile, Nebula was seething in rage at the way he was treating her like she was air. She had never been treated in this manner before, as everyone revered and respected her due to her strength. He thinks he can disregard me like this just because he won once. Nebula's white fur stood up in agitation. Nebula had watched the recording of her defeat in the tournament and saw how Felix destroyed the Colosseum. While this freaked her out a bit, it was still not enough to shake her indomitable spirit and trust in her strength. In fact, it motivated her to work harder than ever to master more space/time-related abilities. This bolstered her confidence back to peak again, knowing that she would most definitely defeat Felix next time now that she saw his trump card. Unbeknownst to her, the only reason Felix was ignoring her was for her master's sake, not wanting to bully his ex-servant. Fortunately, Nebula didn't make any more trouble and everyone waited quietly for the arrival of the examiner. They knew that they were watched by the higher UPS in the law enforcement department and everything they do or say might be the decider of their recruitment. After half an hour went by in total silence and glances flying back and forth, the examiner entered the hall right on time. He was tall with an athletic build and had opalescent skin that reflected various colors depending on the angle of the light. His eyes were a deep shade of violet, and he sported a long, flowing mane of silvery hair that almost looked like liquid mercury. He was wearing the same law enforcer's outfit, but he had an additional strip above a captain, making everyone understand that his rank would be higher than them even if they became captains. Good morning, candidates. I am High Inspector Nolver, and from today onward, you may refer to me as Sir or Inspector. Inspector Nolver introduced, his voice a bit scuffed and irritating to the ear, which was a huge mismatch to his stunning appearance. Everyone greeted back with a respectful look, even Nebula had to lower some for her arrogance to avoid getting disqualified from the start. The governmental officials take their hierarchy extremely seriously, and anyone who went against it would have a high chance of getting kicked out. Since you are seeking the captain's post, it will be unfair to put you against the veteran law enforcers without any basic training. Inspector Nolver shared, so, it was decided that all of you will become temporary trainee law enforcers without governmental benefits. You will be split into a duo partnership and sent to learn under random squads in the city. After the captains deem you to have learned enough, you will be given your first cases. Each case rewards a different set of points depending on its difficulty, complexity, performance, etc. The qualification stage will last for a year and the team with the most points at the end of the year will be joining the real promotional examination for the captain's post. Inspector Nolver eyed them for a moment before he asked, "Everything understood?" No one lifted their hand or dared to open their mouths, not wanting to appear less intelligent than their peers. "Good, the teams will be decided randomly. In 3 seconds, you will get notified of your partner." As he said, after 3 seconds passed, everyone's devices rang twice. Felix glanced at the screen for a moment before lifting back up again and locking eyes with none other than. "Let's work hard together," Ravager said calmly as he approached Felix with an extended hand. Felix shook his hand with a head nod in approval. Meanwhile, Nebula was teamed up with the other soul girl in the group, Sarah Fell. Unlike Nebula, she seemed strict, calculative, and as serious as a math teacher. She was wearing a thin black suit with a short skirt and a pair of black glasses. She had her hair made into a ponytail, matching well with her hoof-like black feet. "You must be really angry at him," Sarah Fell uttered calmly, her eyes affixed on Nebula who was staring daggers at both Felix and Ravager. "Don't get chummy with me." Nebula eyed her coldly, "I will come on top whether with your help or not. So, just get out of my way." "I can't do that." Sarah Fell pushed her glasses up her nose as she clarified, "We are going to be partners. It will be one of the many criteria to judge our performance. If we don't work together, it won't matter if we solve 100 cases, our performance will lower our points score." Tisk, such an irritation. Nebula clicked her tongue in annoyance, but she didn't reject working together again. "Honestly, it's pretty easy to emerge victorious against those two." Sarah Fell mentioned composedly, "They might be powerful, but solving cases depends much more on IQ and EQ, in this department, everyone is falling behind." Sarah Fell seemed just as arrogant and cocky as Nebula, the only difference was its relation to her intelligence. Suddenly, Inspector Nolver asked out loud, "Everyone content with their partners?" Seeing that no one was lifting their hands, Inspector Nolven smiled faintly and moved on. His smile sent shivers down the spine of many candidates. They understood that nothing would have come up good from protesting against their partners. "Tomorrow, you will report to your new squads and I don't have to tell you that you should listen to every command from your captain, right?" "No sir." "Good, you will find your trainee law enforcer's outfit in the pouches in front of you. I want to see you wearing them every single day until you either get accepted or kicked out from the government." Inspector Nolver gave them a strict look. "Understood." "Yes sir." "You are excused." Inspector Nolver took off, leaving everyone using their telekinesis to bring their pouches to their hands. Felix glanced inside and his smile grew slightly wider at the pouch being a dimensional inventory as well. "I have 2 now, you can never complain about too much space." First moment seeing a dimensional pouch. Nebula snickered mockingly after seeing Felix's reaction. Felix's smile went away, which made Nebula slightly delighted at the fact she unnerved him at last. "Don't you have anything better to do than keep spectating me?" Felix asked with a curious tone. He didn't seem mad or bothered, he looked genuinely intrigued, which made it even harder for Nebula to stomach his question. "Let's go, traveler, we have little moment to prepare for tomorrow." Ravager interjected, "Don't waste it on some sore loser." Felix then took off with Ravager towards the gate, not bothering to give a moment of their moment to Nebula. "I was really just curious." Felix's voice resounded from a distance in Nebula's ears, each word was a stab at her prideful heart. When someone kept winning his entire life and never got humbled once, it was normal for him to grow arrogant and proud. Alas, the moment this kind of person loses, it hits them even harder, making it impossible for them to live through the defeat and move past it. In the case of Nebula, there was no way she would let this slide without attempting to regain her pride with whatever means necessary. What a child! Her strength and talent has gotten the best of her. Sarah Fell analyzed calmly as she watched her seething partner. "It's better for me, I can use her strength to qualify for the next stage and then easily obtain rid of her. 1454 A brother's plight. Meanwhile, Felix and Ravager decided to tour the law enforcement department, knowing they would be coming in here way too often. What got you involved in this? I thought you would play a few more tournaments to farm Loomis. Ravager inquired, his tone as frigid as ever. I am not interested in such battles. Felix answered, the government has always been my aim. I see. You? Felix asked. Ravager remained silent for a moment before uttering with a hate-filled voice, it's personal. I see. Felix let the conversation die out there because he didn't elaborate any further. Meanwhile, Ravager's thoughts were consumed with memories of his last encounter with Mr. Attakus. 2 months earlier, an hour after Ravager was pronounced as the champion, Ravager was seen standing in front of Mr. Attakus with a faint relaxed smile like he had finally taken a massive weight off his shoulders. I am ready to take my sister away. He shared. Why so hasty? Mr. Attakus said calmly, stay for the after-party, everyone wants to congratulate you on your magnificent victory. Not interested, hand her over. Ravager's tone got deeper as he brought out the contract and placed it in front of Mr. Attakus. He didn't have to say more for Mr. Attakus to understand his implication. Fine. Mr. Attakus' gaze got colder but he still delivered on his promise. He requested his subordinates to bring her over, causing Ravager's tensed shoulders to relax. In a few moments, the door was unlocked, and an almost identical feminine version of Ravager went inside with 2 guards. She was wearing a black and white maid outfit and had her natural blonde hair braided into 2 ponytails. Her face resembled Ravager's greatly, but when his eyes landed on her, his heart almost broke in half. He rushed to her side immediately and caressed her cheeks with his hands while calling her name. Massia, Massia. Alas, no response. Her eyes seemed soulless like she had seen the 7th level of hell and come back. Massia. Ravager shook her shoulders as he called loudly, but still, his efforts were in vain as his sister's pupils didn't even flinch. What did you do to her? Ravager channeled his anger back at Mr. Attakus, glaring at him murderously. He still remembered how his sweet sister was, laughing like an angel at everything and just being a beacon of light for his entire family. Even when their situation had gotten bad, she was the only thing cheering them up and making them live through tough times until the last moment of their separation. But this person before him, was not his sister. I did nothing to her. Mr. Attakus shrugged his shoulders, I bought her like this. She has been an obedient little puppet ever since. Now, do you want to conclude the deal or keep shouting in my ear? Mr. Attakus warned just as Ravager was about to speak, don't make it harder than it is. Bastard. Ravager cursed under his breath, feeling like his heart was about to burst from fury. But, he managed to maintain his emotions as he knew that the deal wasn't concluded and at this moment, he had to secure his sister first. So, he reached out to sign the transfer contract of servants. Since his little sister had a dark hue, her rights were at the very bottom, making it impossible for her to have any say in such deals. Now, beat it, and don't show your face before me again. The moment the contract was signed, Mr. Attakus kicked them both out of his chamber. As Ravager and his sister were being pushed away by the guards, he turned his head and asked one last time with a suppressed tone. May I know where and when you bought her? You are not eligible to learn such information. Mr. Attakus didn't bother entertaining his question. Although maddened and frustrated by the whole situation, Ravager could only get himself kicked out of his house, knowing that overstaying his welcome might cause him trouble with the law. When he looked down and saw his little sister gazing at him silently, his lips tightened up for a second before they broke into a gentle smile. He held her cold hand and said softly, let's go home. Unresponsive, Massia held her brother's hand and walked with him, seemingly not affected by his emotions in the slightest. In fact, Ravager doubted if she even remembered him, for now, he left those thoughts sit in his mind and took her back home. Boss, don't you think it's dangerous to hand out a fallen spectre into the hands of her brother? Mr. Attakus' subordinate asked with a concerned tone. We might get in deep trouble if the fallen organization heard about it. Trouble? Had. Mr. Attakus sneered, just like any servant, they must not speak about their previous owners and anything they did or experienced under him. So, even if he made her somewhat break the fallen's curse and be able to speak again, she wouldn't dare rat out anyone unless she wanted to get kicked out. Mr. Attakus began to chuckle, realizing that even if she wanted to go for it, her brother would stop her to keep her with him. I see. Stop questioning my decisions and go ask them for 10 more fallen specters. Mr. Attakus said with a wide icy smile, they are simply the greatest slaves to exist on the realm, we have to get as much as possible before the supply runs out. Mr. Attakus had lied before to Ravager when he said that he had purchased his little sister. In fact, it was handed to him for free by a long friend who wanted him to invest in his project. One could say, she was given as a sample. Now, he was ready for the real deal as he had been skeptical about the quality of those fallen specters, which was the reason he kept her for a long time to test her through everything. If Ravager went through the memory of his little sister, forgot his heart, his soul would evaporate on the spot from the horrors she went through in absolute silence like a test subject. With all of this evil happening in the shadows, one could only wonder what was Lord Hades, the Supreme Emperor, doing. The next morning, Felix and Ravager were seen standing straight in front of 3 law enforcers inside a small office room. Felix and Ravager were wearing their own law enforcer's outfit, which was almost identical to the ones worn by their new squad mate. The only difference was theirs had no stripes on its shoulder, which implied their non-existent rank in the department. After all, they were merely temporary trainees and weren't official governmental members. Listen here, you little maggots, I don't like jokes, I don't like laughter, I don't like fun in general. As long as you are in my presence, I expect absolute obedience and professionalism. I don't care if you will make it this year or not, as long as you are under me, you are representing our squad and you better behave like it. The squad's captain said with a rough voice. It matched well with his well-defined bulky body and scar running down his cheek. He had 2 white horns on his forehead, making his race even harder to detect. Yes, Captain. Yes, Captain. Neither Felix nor Ravager were too bothered by his assholish attitude. In fact, they liked it very much as it meant their captain took his job very seriously, which would help them clear more cases and secure more points. Nidam, Hazel, teach them the ins and outs of the department and make them go through our old cases to understand our targets. Yes, Captain Charleston. Nidam and Hazel yelled simultaneously. The captain then nodded his head at everyone and left the office. Hazel, please handle it. This is a job for one. Immediately after the door was closed, Nidam let go of his tense attitude, slumping his shoulders in exhaustion. He reached out to his pocket and pulled out a cigarette, then he started smoking it with a relaxed expression, not caring about Felix and Ravager. Look at me. Hazel ordered with a stern tone, I don't like repeating myself, so my explanation will happen only once and it will be on you if you can't comprehend everything. Both Felix and Ravager nodded in understanding. First of all, the law enforcement department takes care of almost all instances associated to spirits. It doesn't matter if it's a crime, a dispute, a protection escort, a recovery mission, and the list goes on. We are one of the most stressed departments on a daily basis and you should take this seriously if you want to make it far this year. If you aren't resilient enough, you will give up in the first 2 months and return to your easy and tranquil reckless lives. Now, follow me. I will show you around to ease the explanation. 1455 The Rescue Mission. Although Felix and Ravager had done their own tour of the department, there were many places of access to them since they hadn't been considered official law enforcers. So, they voiced no complaint as they followed after Hazel, who kept talking non-stop. Each time she reached a new area, she introduced it and gave them all the details needed to know to help them in their tasks. After a short while, they arrived at the heart of the law enforcement department. It was a vast, sprawling hall stretched out, its vastness echoing the importance of the operations housed within. The hall's ceiling soared high with luminous crystals embedded within it, casting a gentle, ambient glow throughout. This ethereal lighting was only rivaled by the colossal, quad-surfaced screen that floated majestically in the hall's center. Each of its surfaces displayed a kaleidoscope of cases, tasks, and missions, flickering and updating in real time. Below this spectacle, the hall buzzed with activity. Rows of polished, crystalline desks filled the space, each attended by law enforcers draped in their distinct uniforms. They monitored the ever-changing screens, coordinating responses, dispatching teams, and updating case files. The screens not only displayed text but also vivid images, diagrams, and occasionally, live feeds from various locations in the spirit realm, painting a dynamic picture of the ongoing cases. Felix and Ravager were left surprised by this kind of seemingly messy structure that showed nothing but absolute precision. "This is the center of our operations, we call it the Central Hall," Hazel informed as she walked through the buzzing crowd, forcing Felix and Ravager to stay close to her to avoid getting lost. Even though the noise was quite loud, both of them were still able to hear her voice ring loudly in their ears. "The screens above will be your ally and enemy for the next year. You will learn to love it and hate it at the same time," Hazel said while pointing at the massive quadruple screens. "How so?" Ravager inquired. "You see the names and details of the cases flying in the screens?" "Yes. When you finish training under us, you will be able to start claiming cases based on your rank from those screens and working on them individually or with a partner if you have no problem with splitting the end credit," Hazel shared, her eyes drifting from one law enforcer to the other. "Almost everyone here is waiting for good cases to appear so they can snatch them and increase their rank through overlapping credits. In this place, there is no pulling rank. It's the law of the jungle, first come, first serve," Hazel concluded. Felix and Ravager nodded in understanding even though there were many points that confused them. "Won't no one do any job if everyone keeps waiting here for the best case to show up?" Felix asked calmly. "No," Hazel clarified, "everyone you see here has already finished their daily mandatory work. Such work will be related to the squad and the captain's orders. Only when the work is concluded, will the law enforcer be given free time to work on his own credits if he desired." "I see, so this is more like overtime work," Ravager disclosed. "Exactly," Hazel added, "since everyone in the government is pretty competitive to climb the ladder, no one dares to laze around after finishing their mandatory jobs. This is one of the many reasons why the heavenly plane is always peaceful." "Peaceful? Hey!" Felix and Ravager scoffed at the same time in their minds at her naive statement. Both of them had somewhat experienced the dark side of the heavenly plane and saw what those, in power, could do once they learned how to abuse the rules and the system to their favor. In their eyes, the only reason the heavenly plane seemed peaceful was because the screams of despair and agony of the wronged were being muffled. Not noticing their reaction, Hazel passed through the hall and continued on with her explanation. "Even though the credits gained from finishing those additional cases won't be much help to you if you don't become an official law enforcer, I advise you to still do them. You will be earning plenty of points and if you desire to topple over the other teams, you will need every single one of them. This is an opportunity to investigate what happened to my sister. This is a chance to learn more about Sharky and find out what is he cooking in the shadows." Hazel didn't need to tell them this since both of them were already planning to take advantage of the system for their own personal agendas. Getting points was great, but both of them understood that there was a high chance of not becoming a captain even if they succeeded in the qualification stage. So, it was best to work on their own personal cases while they still had the government's authority on their side. Just as Hazel was about to move to the next subject, her crystal device started vibrating. She stopped immediately and picked up the call, showing a solemn expression. A moment later, she turned around and said, "It's your lucky day, our captain was assigned a rescue mission in the Beast Kingdom and asked for your attendance. Let's group up." Without waiting for them to react to the news, she took off into the air, forcing them to chase after her quickly. "Listen well, we aren't the only squad being dispatched, we will be accompanied by Captain Frederick's squad and Captain Quinton's squad from the capital." Captain Charleston notified with his hands held behind his back, seemingly even more sterner than before. "Wow, isn't this a bit too heavy?" Hazel asked with a concerned tone, "What kind of beasts are we dealing with here?" "It's rapid killer bees hive," Captain Charleston uttered. Everyone took a deep cold breath in shock and fear, even Felix raised an eyebrow in distress. He learned a bit about the greatest dangers in the Beast's Kingdom in case he ended up encroaching on their territory sometimes. There were 7 marked death zones ruled by 7 kinds of creatures. The rapid killer bees hive owns the Eastern Territory and was considered its ruler, dominating all beasts and creatures in it, striking fear in any target before it. Which stupid hunters decided to enter a death zone? Don't they know better? Nidam clicked his tongue in criticism. The reports said that a squad consisting of 10 hunters had decided to venture deeper to hunt down the pink-stripped panther. Unfortunately, they have been ambushed by a pack of greyish hyenas and 3 of them were forced into the rapid killer bees hive territory. The law enforcers in the nearest city were contacted first for an emergency rescue, but they failed to retrieve the soul flames and some of them were eaten to the last bone. We have been hired not to rescue just the hunters but also our companions in arms. Captain Charleston concluded with a strict expression, "So, be at your best performance." "Yes, sir." Everyone shouted simultaneously. Captain Charleston glanced at Felix and Ravager for a moment before ordering them, "You aren't expected to offer any help. Your entire job will be to watch our flank and keep the spirit flames protected in jars until we bring them back to safety, understood?" "Yes." The fact that they were taken during such a difficult mission was already something they were more than grateful for. That's because if the mission was successful, they would be rewarded a great amount of points due to its importance and difficulty. "Let's move out, we will group up with the squads near the forest's entrance." Without wasting a single moment, Captain Charleston led his squad outside of the department and all of them jumped inside their squad's designated vehicle. Then, they departed to the Beast Kingdom. A couple of hours later, Captain Charleston's squad had arrived at the entrance to the Beast's Kingdom's forest. When Felix looked briefly from the window, he noticed many vehicles parked in the area. Some belonged to the department and some seemed civilian-related. In a moment, Felix and his squad went to group up with the other squads gathered right at the tip of the forest. "Looks like a few more squads were summoned from other cities," Hazel mentioned as she eyed the separated cliques of law enforcers. There were at least 30 of them and since each squad consisted of no less than 6 members, this meant at least 6 squads were assigned this mission. "It's understandable, we will be dealing with the killer bees," Nida muttered as he lit up cigarettes, "those mother-f***ers hurt as hell and if we aren't careful, we will be the ones needing a rescue." After Captain Charleston arrived with his team at the party, a lanky man with long purplish arms and 3 eyes on his forehead scolded the moment he saw Felix and Ravager. "Charleston, you know this mission is too difficult even for some of the veterans, why have you brought the newbies on their first day on the job?" "I am usually against this irritating freak's side, but on this one, I have to agree." A pale beautiful vampire female with a red gloss supported with an unhappy tone. "We have no interest in baggage. If I wasn't thinking for your sake, I would have brought the newbies assigned to me as well." The rest of the captains and their squads seemed in favor of their takes as no one was giving Felix and Ravager any ounce of faith in their capabilities. "Damn, I can understand underestimating me, but even Traveler." Ravager frowned, he destroyed half of the Colosseum with one punch, how can he be a hindrance in this mission? Even Felix was somewhat surprised by their reaction. He never expected to be treated with reverence, but to be outright shunned even after his performance, he thought it was a bit too weird. Are they much stronger than me or are they just trying to make it difficult for the captain? 1456 The Rescue Mission 2. Both of them are capable fighters who have demonstrated a high level of prowess in the Heavenly Plains tournament. They can handle themselves. Captain Charleston defended, his arms crossed above his chest in composure. Whatever strength they possess, you know damn well it will be for naught against the real monsters inside the Beast Kingdom. The vampire woman scoffed. That's enough, Bella. Captain Frederick called with a solemn tone. Charleston will hold responsibility over his own squad. Let's start moving. It won't end well for us if we lose the daylight and rescue no one. Everyone put matters at rest for now and began their mobilization through the breathtaking fantastical jungle. While it looked beautiful from the outside, the dense canopy overhead hardly allowed any sunlight to penetrate, making the air somewhat tense. Communicate only through telepathy from this moment on. Captain Quinton delivered a message to everyone and they responded with head nods. Looks like discipline runs deep in the law enforcement department. Everyone is maintaining a loose formation able to cover all corners and help anyone in distress. Felix commented as he analyzed how the squads were moving and behaving. Because he and Ravager were new to the whole scene, no one had told them about the formation, making them seem out of place. Let's do this. Felix recognized his true position in the formation and slowly adjusted his footsteps until he fit perfectly into it, akin to a jigsaw puzzle piece. Ravager, walk 10 steps behind Hazel and maintain the same speed as her. Felix sent a private message. Ravager was first confused. But, when he glanced back at him, he realized that he was the only one who seemed to be moving randomly. He understood that the position given to him by Felix was his true place. Much appreciated. He gave Felix a slight head nod and did as he was told. He has good eyes indeed. He might not be so bad after all. To figure out we are moving in a formation and adjust to it almost instantly, he sure is an interesting newbie. Captain Charleston and the rest of the captains noticed the sudden change in formation almost immediately and figured out that it was handled by Felix. 100 points. Captain Charleston reached out to his device and added points to Felix's name without saying anything. Since everyone else kept their mouths shut, nothing seemed to have changed from their entry point. 1 hour later. This is it. The heart of their territory. Keep your comms clean and maintain a tight formation. We get in, rescue the soul flames, and get out. Felix could see the sudden shift in mindset of his companions as even the captains looked more serious than ever. He could see why this area was marked as a death zone. The trees seemed lifeless, sapped out of any soul in them, while the ground looked rugged and moistless like it hadn't rained here for years. In reality, it rained almost every week, but the rapid killer bees were known to devour anything with a substance of life. As they progressed, a sudden humming of bees was picked by the ones with the most sensitive ears. Captain, we have movement ahead of us. Hazel warned. She was a wind elementalist, allowing her to pick the tiniest movements in the air from a far distance. Nidam, scout ahead. Captain Charleston ordered. On it. Nidam threw the turned-off cigarette butt on the ground and transformed himself into a shadow, then, he merged with the tree's shadows and disappeared. Everyone came to a sudden halt, awaiting his intel. A few moments later, he popped up from the ground again and shared, "There is a small killer bee swarm moving in our direction. We can't waste time avoiding any swarm we meet, but we have to eliminate them in a single go and without raising any noise in the slightest." Captain Bella uttered. "Indeed, if we don't kill them all right away, with their overwhelming speed and agility, some of them will get out and alert the hive." Captain Charleston agreed. The humming grew louder, evolving into an aggressive drone, making everyone get extra tense. "Leave it to me." Captain Bella separated from the group with a single silent dash. No one chased after her, knowing that she was more than capable of pulling it off. As she weaved through the trees, Captain Bella was forced to stop and hide behind a giant boulder after the sky above her seemed to have turned dark. "How unpleasant!" she uttered with a disgusted look at the sight of a swarm of giant killer bees descending, their enormous wings casting menacing shadows over the forest floor. It was an threatening sight, one that could send any seasoned warrior running in fear. But Captain Bella stood her ground, her demeanor calm yet fiercely determined. As the deafening buzz grew louder and the swarm drew closer, she took a deep breath, her fingers flexing in anticipation. Closing her eyes, she began to channel her energy, her fingers moving in intricate patterns. The ground beneath her trembled as a force began to pull at the very essence of the swarm. The bees, initially in an organized and threatening formation, began to lose control, spiraling towards one another. Bella intensified her focus, her brows furrowing with concentration. As if caught in an unseen vortex, the swarm began to converge into a single, dense mass. Their buzzing grew frantic, a chaos of confusion and desperation. The once giant swarm was now a tight, pulsating ball of bees, their wings and bodies crushed against one another. Implosion! With a final flourish of her hands and a deep exhale, Captain Bella unleashed the full energy of the gravity clutch. The ball imploded in silence, making it impossible for even noise to escape her gravity clutch. When the dust settled, there was nothing left of the swarm but the echoes of their final buzz. "Path is clear," Captain Bella reported. The rest swiftly grouped up with her and commanded her with head nods after seeing the aftermath of the swarm. Then, they continued treading forward, but this time, Nidam was sent ahead as a permanent scout. Another small swarm ahead. One medium-sized swarm to our left. 3 swarms are grouped up near each other. He kept reporting back to them and they acted properly based on the information. "We are getting a bit too deep." Captain Charleston frowned. How did the hunters and law enforcers make it this far? Something isn't right. I think so too. The hive's heart should be merely a few kilometers away. It can't be possible for such weak hunters to make it this far while being chased. The others agreed with his assessment as they knew that the killer bees were merciless and would never allow anyone to get this close to their hive without a fight. It didn't take them long to confirm their hunch. What the hell? Nidam almost popped out of his shadow form from shock the moment he arrived at the hive's heart and witnessed the ludicrous scene before him. The spirit flames of the hunters and the law enforcers were all gathered under a gigantic leafless tree with a freaky living bulge on its trunk. The living bulge was made out of thousands upon thousands of killer bees stacked against each other, making it impossible to even see the hive. The entire area surrounding the tree wasn't peaceful in the slightest. There were many more bees of all sizes, flying around the hive akin to army drones. This entire scene sent shivers down Nidam's spine as he realized a horrifying truth he didn't dare to accept. The Queen's intelligence has increased again. Without an ounce of hesitation, he returned back to the squads and reported everything he had seen. No one believed him at the start, but seeing his fearful expression made their hearts sink to the bottom of their stomach. "I can't believe this. The hive's queen has become smarter again and understood that we will be coming to retrieve the spirit's flames, making her use them as bait right under her hive." Hazel commentated with a slightly freaked out tone. Almost everyone gulped a mouthful in anxiety at the implication of this scenario. They were already under the impression that the hive queen's intelligence was improving with each confrontation. But, they never expected her to reach this level, where she could even predict the future and plan to the hive's benefit. "Do we retreat and ask for reinforcement?" Captain Thornhack asked. He was the freaky purplish captain with long arms. "No, numbers are useless against the killer bee hive." Captain Frederick shook his head. "The Queen's telekinesis prowess is powerful enough to splatter us all into a paste the instant we step near the hive." "He is right. This is a rescue mission for a reason and not an extermination mission." Captain Charleston agreed. "We have to think of a method to retrieve the spirit's flames without engaging with the Queen." "How exactly can we do that?" Captain Bella uttered with an irritated tone. "None of us can handle her telekinesis prowess and it will be near impossible for someone to sneak past her detections and retrieve the spirit's flames." 1457 The Rescue Mission 3. "It's challenging, but we have no other option," Captain Frederick said. "Tisk, if you were going to bring new bees, you should have brought Nebula at least." Captain Bella scoffed, we could have used her space/time abilities to our advantage in this situation. Both Felix and Ravager were left speechless at her constant attacks, but they remained silent. While it didn't please them, somehow they agreed with her second part. Nebula would have been a perfect assistant here, good thing her squad hasn't been summoned. Ravager thought to himself, she would have earned a crapload of points. If you have no solutions, refrain from speaking again. Captain Charleston chided. Captain, can I give it a go? Nidam asked for permission. What do you have in mind? Everyone's ears perked up in interest. I will use my shadow form to get as close as possible to the hive without alerting the queen. Then, I will use shadow grasp to steal the spirit's flames and dip back into the shadows. The plan does sound promising, but it's too dangerous. Captain Charleston frowned, the queen's mental range is too wide and I doubt even your shadow form can escape her detection. It's not like we have any other choice at the moment. Captain Quinton uttered, we have to let him give it a try. He is my squadmate. Captain, I got it. Nidam interjected with an assured tone, knowing that their captain might seem strict and tough, but he would never let them do something outside of their power. Captain Charleston looked at him for a moment before warning him. Be careful and prioritize your safety. If you fell down as well, you will join the rest of the victims. Nidam gave him a single nod and then took off on his own, his raven black cloak swirling around him for a moment before he disappeared. Since no one dared to step inside the hive's territory, Nidam was truly on his own. In a few moments, he returned to the same place from before, a spot allowing him to see the hive but at the same time maintain a decent distance from it. I am at least 300 meters away from the hive, the queen hasn't sent anyone at me or used her telekinesis. I should get closer. Nidam encroached from one shadow to another while making sure to keep his senses heightened to the max, knowing a single second would separate him from death. Spirits might not die, but at this very moment, he knew that if he became hostage to the hive, it would take law enforcement a decent amount of time to rescue him. This is fine enough. Let's not get too greedy. Nidam's heartbeats accelerated at the notion of being surrounded by more than 100,000 killer bees. He understood that there were swarms hidden underground, in trees, inside boulders, and at a single order from the queen, they would come out and lung at him. I have one shot at this, be cool, be cool. Nidam calmed his raging heart for a few seconds before he zoned out completely on the spirit's flames. Now, the moment his focus was at its peak, he reached out, commanding the shadows to extend from his fingertips. They writhed and stretched, creeping towards the spirit's flames with a hunger to free them from this prison. However, as they made contact, Nidam felt a force pushing back, an impenetrable wall of energy. What the hell? He gritted his teeth, trying to amplify his power, but it was futile. The flames didn't so much as flicker, steadfastly remaining in their position. It can't be. The realization hit him hard. The bee queen was using her telekinesis on the spirit's flames. Her mental chains were so powerful that they made the very act of moving the flames impossible. But that wasn't the worst part. In his attempt to meddle, he had inadvertently alerted her to his presence. Rumble. A sinister vibration resonated through the ground, growing in intensity. Then, with a speed that belied its origin, a telekinetic spear, sharp and deadly, lanced from the heart of the hive. Before Nidam could even react, it impaled him straight through the heart, leaving his eyes widened in shock and a final breath escaping him. Because he used a shadow grip, he had to cancel his shadow form for a split second. Yet, it was more than enough for the bee queen to finish him off. Telekinesis protection. Bzzzzz. Fortunately, he passed out as his body got swarmed with thousands of killer bees, munching on his flesh and bones until nothing was left but his spirit flame. It began moving into the pile of the spirit flames, making the hive resemble a sinister trap, ensnaring anyone bold enough to challenge its presence. He was taken out. Captain Charleston sighed after receiving the last message from Nidam. Did he tell you what happened? Captain Bella inquired. Only telekinesis protection. What does that mean? Since the queen bee already uses telekinesis protection on its hive, it meant he was referring to the spirit's flames. Captain Thornhack analyzed with a grim look. *T, isn't this mission doomed then? Hazel said, her eyes emitting hopelessness. Almost everyone thought the same as they understood that it would be nearly impossible to break her telekinesis pressure on the spirit's flames while at the same time having to defend against her terrifying mental prowess and armies of flesh-eating bees. I guess we can only retreat and hand over the mission to our seniors. It won't sit right with me to lose this kind of credit. Me neither. Is it really hopeless? While the situation was grim and seemed almost impossible to handle, still no one was willing to hand over this opportunity to earn credits. The more difficult and important the mission was, the more credit was rewarded. So, such a mission was too rare to land in anyone's hands. What do you think, traveler? Ravager inquired. You have been awfully quiet the entire time. I am contemplating whether I share my strategy with the captains or not. Felix confessed, not too bothered. Strategy? You actually have an idea? Ravager raised an eyebrow in surprise. What are you waiting for? Share it, even if they don't agree to it. You might earn points just by actively trying to help. Yeah, I don't know about that. Felix's eyelids twitched as he knew that his plan could be considered a leap of faith in his favor. If he dared bring it up, there was a high chance of him getting beaten to death or kicked from the mission entirely. But at this point, he knew that if he didn't take chances to earn as many points as possible, it would bait him in the ass later on. Still, he didn't outright bring it in public but shared it with his sensible captain first. Captain, I have somewhat of a dangerous plan. Felix said. What do you have in mind? Captain Charleston gave him an ear. Even though Felix was a newbie, he didn't discourage him or look down on him like the others. In his eyes, as long as one maintains professionalism, he should be treated with respect regardless of his rank. Alas, this outtake on life was almost shattered after hearing Felix's insane strategy. Are you crazy? No one is dumb enough to trust you with their lives like this. Captain Charleston scolded, losing his temper for the first time in a long while. What's wrong? His sudden change of attitude caught everyone by surprise. Just back me up and I will convince them. Felix requested with an indifferent look. Captain Charleston looked at Felix for a moment and then at the other captains and their squads. His mind was telling him to reject Felix's retarded idea, but his gut feeling was somehow leaning to believe him. Captain Sherlezen was a man who depended on his guts more than his rationality in such scenarios. So, he sighed and gave Felix permission with a wave of his hand. Felix stepped forward, catching everyone's attention, and then spoke calmly, I'm aware that our situation is dire, and the conventional methods will fail us. But I've been working on a risky plan. If executed correctly, it will not only save us but also get rid of the rapid killer beehive once and for all. As expected, Captain Bella and Thornhack didn't let go of such an opportunity to put him in his place. What a joke, a temporary trainee on his first day of the job wanting to step up and lead the mission. Boy, sit back and refrain from opening your mouth again, we have no time for nonsense. I have heard his plan and while it's dangerous for us, if it works, it will deliver the results he promised. Captain Charleston supported. His assistants had changed the mood completely as the other captains and squad mates seemed to be more interested in hearing it now. Before Captain Bella could interject, the other captains gave Felix permission to include them in it. The plan is simple. I need you all to launch a coordinated attack on the hive, get their attention, and keep them busy. Every bee, especially the queen, should believe you are the main threat. While you act as a decoy, I will get closer to the hive and unleash the same punch from the Heavenly Plains tournament. You have seen what kind of destruction it delivers and I promise you, there won't be any hive left standing after it lands. In reality, Felix's plan was more complex than this, as he would need to calibrate the space-time punch to the hive's frequency, so he would pull off the focus on it alone, unlike the last punch. That one was a simple use of barbaric force, and the punch's force spread out everywhere, lowering its potency. Alas, even when he avoided explaining the nitty-gritty details of his element, no one was easily convinced by his insane plan. That's an incredibly delusional plan. Captain Bella cursed. Boy, just admit you want to get us all killed and be done with it. Traveler, your punch is indeed mind-blowing, but the Queen's telekinesis barrier is extremely tough to break, and I doubt even our combined most powerful abilities will break it. Captain Frederick smiled wryly. Indeed, if it was so simple to finish the hive off, we would have done it years ago. Captain Quinton nodded. It's okay, he is still a newbie and learning. The others rained on Felix as well, with doubts and subtle mocking insults, wanting to make him feel like a newbie who had no clue what he was talking about. Felix remained unconcerned and quiet throughout the whole barrage. I think it would have been best if you remained quiet, my bad. Ravager felt awkward at the sight of his partner getting a verbal beat down, thinking that it was due to his bad advice. 1458 Rescue Mission 4. When they were close to finish, Felix opened his mouth and uttered. The Queen Bee clearly wants to consume us for nutrition and won't attempt using her full strength to maintain our bodies. So, it's more than possible to buy me time while still keeping yourselves safe. While his logic was sound, no one was brought to his side just yet, as there were still many problematic parts about his plan. Didn't you hear what Captain Frederick said? Captain Bella sneered. Even our combined powerful abilities won't be enough to break through the Queen Bee's telekinesis barrier. What makes you think your punch will be any good? You think you are stronger than all of us combined? Heh. The others didn't openly mock Felix as boldly as her, but none of them entertained his insane conviction of being able to slay Queen Bee, even with Captain Charleson's blessings. Still, Felix wasn't planning to give up yet. From the way I see it, you guys won't have anything to lose by trusting in my plan. Felix disclosed coolly, if my plan succeeded, all of you will be rewarded with high levels of credits while me and Ravager will get merely points for our examination. I have no interest in hogging the credits. If the plan failed, which is highly unlikely, I can assure you that the hive will suffer from massive damages, allowing us to retreat to safety and even possibly rescue the spirit's flames during its weakened state. The only way for us to truly lose is by retreating without giving any plan a chance. I doubt any one of you wants to hand out this mission to other squads. When Felix was done speaking, no one jumped in with a taunting remark or a foolish statement again. Even Captain Bella looked deep in thought. While she seemed against Felix and Ravager, it was only because they were newbies and she hated liabilities. But, if one of them proved himself capable in their setting, she had no problems with giving out respect when due. Everything that Felix had said was logical and rational, making her realize that he wasn't speaking out of his ass like some prideful rookie, but he actually knew what he was talking about. The others felt the same way as her, making them share knowing glances between each other. What do you think? I say we go for it. Hold on a second, what if the plan failed and his punch didn't deliver the promised damages? Captain Quinton interjected rationally. He doesn't seem of the type to throw his word around without guarantees, but, Captain Charleson assured, if the situation didn't develop as envisioned, I will take full responsibility. You sure trust in your newbie easily to endanger your career like this? Captain Bella shook her head. It's my decision, and since I am taking the full responsibility, I will be leading the plan. No one had any problem with that, even though it meant his squad would earn the most credits. After the decision was made, the captains discussed furthermore their own strategy to resist the hive's attacks and buy Felix as much time as possible. When they reached a final decision, they didn't waste any more time and started their march through the dense canopy of the forest. As they walked in a tight formation, the low hum of the thousands of swarms resonated through the trees, growing louder and more menacing, causing their expressions to turn grim. Let's hope this works out. Just trust the process. Everyone ready? Yes. From the ground, a sudden shimmering thick telekinetic barrier rose, encircling the group of squads. The force field rippled like water, reflecting the sun's rays in a dazzling spectacle. This was a barrier created through the efforts of each member, making it possible to turn it into an iron fortress capable of resisting 10 times the individual damage. Charge! With one final shout from Captain Charleston, everyone dashed through the trees and appeared at the largest empty field that was filled to the brim with killer bees. Just like predators smelling fresh meat, the killer bees didn't even await their queen's commands as they swiftly encased the telekinesis barrier, hitting it with their stinger. Cling! Cling! The telekinesis barrier held strong against their attacks, but the sheer number of them made everyone understand that the situation wouldn't last in their favor for long. Kill them! Captain Quinton, veins glowing fiery red, sent arcs of flame into the sky, incinerating scores of the approaching swarm. Each explosion of flame illuminated the forest, painting the trees in brilliant hues of orange and red. From Captain Frederick's side, a torrential downpour began, not from the clouds, but from his squad's conjuring. Water benders sent massive waves crashing against the barrier, washing away bees that got too close and dousing any fires that threatened to spread. Captain Bella used her gravitational abilities to gather swarms in single spots, helping her squad mates eliminate them with the least amount of effort. Even Ravager joined the party and kept firing deadly fire wind balls at each swarm, creating giant bloody holes, just to be filled up with more bees. They are never ending. Still, no matter how many bees they take down, triple the amount emerge from somewhere. Yet, this wasn't even the real threat. In front of them, the queen bee emerged from the hive. Her wings beat with fury, sending gusts that rustled leaves and bent tree trunks. Even her physical side looked menacing, causing most law enforcers to gulp's mouthful in fear. This was the first time they witnessed the rapid queen bee, the ruler of one of the 7 death zones. Without messing around, Queen Bee's red eyes locked on them and conjured hundreds of telekinesis projectiles before raining them on their barrier, uncaring about the swarms surrounding it. Thud! Thud! Shit! The barrier is taking a beating. She is much more powerful than we anticipated. Damn it! At this pace, we will lose the mega barrier in less than a minute. Hold formation at all cost. The barrier rocked back and forth with each projectile slamming against its body, causing everyone's faces to lose color instantly. Some law enforcers were already bleeding from their noses, suffering from the backlash. Where is that bastard? Is he not done yet? Captain Bella returned to her old self as she looked around her and found no Felix to be seen. Felix was in fact hiding on top of a tree with many branches while maintaining a decent distance from the battle. Still, he was close enough to the queen, his gaze was intensely fixed on her, seeming to pierce through the surrounding pandemonium. With a deep breath, he felt for the distinct frequency that resonated from her, a unique vibration in the vast spectrum of space-time. It belonged to only her, and he was trying his best to lock on it. During his training in the past months, he focused purely on this step to facilitate his control over the random destruction of his space-time attacks. Now, his training was being paid off as he felt her frequency calling for him even through the billion other frequencies inside the chaotic battlefield. Meanwhile, the telekinesis barrier, painstakingly maintained by the squads, was the only thing standing between them and utter destruction. But as seconds passed and Felix continued his focus, the queen bee, sensing a vulnerability, unleashed a forceful surge. The barrier wavered and then, with a violent shattering sound, dispersed into fragmented shards of energy. The squads were now exposed, at the mercy of the mightiest being in the forest. Crap! Do we retreat? Retreat where? Captain Charleston smiled bitterly as he felt his body suddenly tightening up before completely turning frozen in place. The rest of the squads experienced the same sensation, making their expressions go pale instantly at the realization that Queen Bee had used her terrifying telekinesis to imprison them. As they watched the swarms of thousands of flesh-eating bees surround them, all of them cursed out Felix in their minds and at themselves for getting baited into this bullshit plan. But in that split second of impending doom, Felix had locked in on the precise frequency. Without hesitation, he pulled his arm back and thrust it forward, punching the very fabric of the air before him. The space around his fist shattered like brittle glass, sending ripples through the dimensions. The force of the punch, augmented by the resonance with the queen bee's frequency, traveled with alarming speed. Before she could even register the impending doom, her formidable telekinesis barrier and then her very form crumbled to fragments under the might of the attack. Boom! The explosion came albeit late, but it caused all the swarms in the area to fall into the ground from sheer power of the aftermath. The captains and their squad mates' faces were turned from despair into utter disbelief at the sight of the residual force from Felix's punch continued its path, leaving a vast cylindrical tunnel of destruction. Trees, foliage, and unfortunate beasts within a kilometer were utterly obliterated in its wake. The squads, while safe from the queen bee, felt their hearts grew cold at such a sheer display of overwhelming destruction, making them feel like they were in the presence of another monster. Every couple months he comes back 10 times stronger. How does he do it? Ravager remained affixed on his spot, his heart beating out of his chest at the thought that not a year ago, he actually went toe-to-toe against Felix. Now, he didn't just obliterate one of the 7 rulers of the beast's kingdom, but did it in such a fashion, it left no doubt in anyone's minds that he wasn't to be fucked with. 1459 needing a big case. The remnants of elemental fury, lingering flames, dissipating ice, crackling lightning, now seemed trivial against the backdrop of the enormous void Felix had created. Captain Charleston was the first to break the trance, his gaze still anchored on the spot where the queen bee had been. "By the spirits," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I've seen some mighty displays in my years, but nothing like that." Captain Bella, who had so confidently berating Felix all this time, was momentarily speechless. Her usually stern face was a canvas of shock and admiration. She glanced at her teammates, some of whom were still picking themselves up from the ground, and managed, that was, otherworldly. Everyone else's reaction was more or less the same as they hadn't witnessed before such potent destruction. Even the Colosseum's collapse was nothing before this punch, since its aftermath resembled a concentrated invisible beam. A beam powerful enough to erase anything in its path, and they knew that if one of them was behind the queen, their ending would have been the same. Unbeknownst to them, this was one of Felix's weakest attacks while using the space-time resonance. "I still haven't mastered its control yet." Felix seemed unsatisfied with his work. It should have left no aftermath. Felix locked on the queen bee's frequency for the sake of erasing it from existence without causing any damage in the area. While he had avoided the random spread of the vibration waves, he was still yet incapable of stopping them from spreading at all. This can't be sound element. I have seen great masters of sound element and none of them were capable of causing such potent destruction." Captain Frederick inquired with an eyebrow raised, "Is it really just sound?" "Yes," Felix answered. Since sound was a mere branch of vibration element, it was easy for him to use it as a way to avoid explaining himself. As for the details? Even when everyone seemed skeptical and wanted to know more, it was an unofficial rule to never ask anyone about the details of their abilities. After all, there was no such thing as affinity or familiarity with elements. Everyone was capable of learning the same elemental abilities if they managed to learn how to master each ability. The way to learn them the fastest was by copying another experienced fighter's method. Damn, if I knew sound element could be so powerful, I would have focused on it more. All we have is time. I think I will start learning more about it. Who knows, I might master the same ability. Most of the law enforcers seemed somewhat envious of Felix, as all of them desired to possess such behemoth strength, and some of them even had real thoughts about switching to sound element. Felix looked at them silently, not sympathetic in the slightest after baiting them to chase a dead end. A couple of hours later, The news of the rescue mission had gone viral throughout all the law enforcement departments in the heavenly plane. Especially, when the main selling point was a new bee finishing off the rapid killer beehive with its monstrous queen bee. Even though Felix didn't want the credits, it was impossible for the law enforcers to steal the win from him by changing the events. After all, they needed to put an exact detailed report of everything that happened after each case or mission. The ones affected the most by the news were the other contestants in the qualification stage, as they had realized that Felix and Ravager were about to earn a significant amount of points. Damn it! Damn it! I would have done the same if I was taken there. Lucky bastards! Nebula banged on the table in frustration and anger at the thought of being left behind in the first day. Don't mind it, it's a rough start for us, but they won't be ahead for much longer. Seraphel said as she pushed her glasses up her nose. Such missions are rare, and they have gotten extremely lucky to be included in them. From now on, they will have to get by with normal cases, and we will pull ahead sure enough. This was exactly what happened for the next couple of months. Felix and Ravager were seen somewhat struggling with either squad duties or individual cases in their free time. That's because law enforcers had so many rules they had to abide by when running cases, making it unthinkable to bend the law for even a little. It was nothing like when he was working under Miss Sani. Sometime, he had plenty of evidence to finish up a case, but just as he was about to conclude it, the victim would come forward and drop the case entirely. This wasted Felix's entire time and resources for nothing in return. The worst part, he couldn't even punish the victim or question his reasons for dropping it, even though he knew he was bribed by the assailants. The last nail in the coffin was Felix having to present all evidence found, and the method used to find them during his report without lies. He could not rely on his trusted illusion abilities in his investigations. This forced him to rely only on vibration element, which wasn't as optimal as illusion element. Ravager was in the same boat as him in this case. Meanwhile, Nebula and Seraphel turned out to be the perfect duo, and they had solved double the number of cases than all other teams. Nebula's space/time abilities were legit perfect tools for investigation. Especially, memory recall ability that allowed her to return time in a small area, showing all the scenes happening in that place akin to fading holographic scenes. Seraphel was also of a great assistance as she had a major network behind her back, allowing her to find information in the least expected areas. Felix had to rely on Miss Sani's network on so many cases, but since her network was more underground, it forced him to not use the evidence without giving out the source. Obviously, Miss Sani would never approve of such thing. Right now, Felix and Ravager were seen sitting in their office with signs of distress on their faces. We may not see their points, but they must have already surpassed us. Ravager said with a solemn tone. We have gotten 3,000 points from the rescue mission and more than 1,000 honorary points from the other squads. Felix shook his head. Even with their current output, we should be still ahead. But, it won't be for long if we don't make a change in our strategy. Ravager said. Felix nodded in agreement. I think we should aim for a much bigger case, a big one which will win us the competition immediately after solving it. It's highly risky. I know, duration isn't our ally and there is a high chance of not solving it before the end of the year. But, what else do we have? Felix remained silent. Nebula and Seraphel had proved to be a much more pain in the ass than he anticipated, and with the limitations imposed on him, he really discovered no method to keep their lead unless they got lucky with another difficult battle-related mission. All right, we will do it, but I will be the one choosing the case. Felix approved. Fine. Ravager didn't decline since he wasn't putting the same kind of results as Felix in their partnership. Let's go camp in the central hall. For the next week, neither Felix nor Ravager had accepted any individual case after their shifts ended. They simply remained sitting under the screens in the central hall, awaiting the perfect case to save them. Whenever the girls came in and saw them like this, they made sure to leave some mocking remarks before taking off with new cases to solve. Felix and Ravager always ignored them and kept their focus on the screens, knowing that the moment a significant case show up, there will be tens of other law enforcers competing to accept it first. Our shift is about to start, I guess no luck today as well. Ravager sighed as he glanced at his device. You may go and prepare, I will stay here for a little longer. Okay, don't be late, you know how the captain is. After Ravager took his leave, Felix lifted his head again and stared at the large four-sided screens hanging overhead flashing with hundreds of tasks, missions, and cases. The colors, symbols, and data flashed like a coordinated dance of light and sound, a symphony of organized chaos. His eyes flitted through the screens, searching for anything that caught his attention. Just as he was about to leave it for now and group up with his squad, a specific case blipped into view on one of the screens. The header read, Lost Dark Spirit Alert. He tapped the case, and the screen expanded to show the details. It read, Location, Eastern Alleyways, Sector 4D. Situation, a lost dark spirit located. Appears disoriented and lacking memory. Status, contained temporarily. Requires immediate investigation. His eyes narrowed as he read the details. He had a potent feeling that this case was related to fallen specters since it was rare for anyone to lose memories in the heavenly plane. Knowing that he had no duration to ponder about it, Felix bet on his feelings and accepted the case before it drew anyone's attention. 1460 Arian Del Mar. After he took the case, he went to meet up with his squad, and they started their day shift with working on some old cases. When they were done, Felix and Ravager were rewarded with a bit of points for their performance, but nothing too far-reaching like in the rescue mission. Receiving 6,000 or more overall from such an insane achievement might seem little, but it was the highest amount possible to be given in that scenario. That's because each squad had a limit on how many points they could give out to the contestants in each mission to avoid biased favorism. So, it was impossible for Felix and Ravager to be set for the entire duration of the competition from a single mission, which helped the girls catch up to them through an insane quantity of solved cases. After the day shift ended, Felix updated Ravager about case accepted as they walked towards one of the interrogation rooms. He was informed that the lost spirit was brought in for a while now, and he was waiting just for them. In a short while, Felix and Ravager were standing behind a see-through glass window with their arms crossed. Their foreheads were creased as they observed the lone figure sitting on the other side. His eyes, empty and distant, were fixed on a point on the wall. He seemed lost in an abyss of his thoughts, unaffected by the physical world around him. He does have the characteristics of a fallen spectre. Felix thought. He had never seen a fallen spectre before, but he was told by Miss Sani some of their features. One of the infamous characteristics was the silent absent-mindedness of the spirit, remaining in this condition until he gets an order from his master. His condition resembles my sister greatly. Ravager narrowed his eyes. Does he have a relation to the people who have harmed my sister? Is something wrong? Felix asked after seeing his sudden shift of emotions. Nothing important. Ravager brushed it off before saying, I think it's time we find out his identity. Felix knew that something wasn't right, but he decided to ignore it for now. Felix walked in with Ravager by his side. The door shut behind them with a soft click. The spirit did not acknowledge their entrance, nor did he shift his gaze. Ravager cleared his throat, his voice gruff. Hey! He exclaimed, trying to catch the spirit's attention, but to no avail. Felix approached the table, his footsteps deliberate and slow. He leaned forward, trying to find a hint of consciousness in the spirit's eyes. Can you hear me? He asked calmly. Silence. Felix tried a different approach. He reached out, placing a hand on the spirit's shoulder. At the touch, a fleeting ripple of energy moved across the spirit's form, like a stone disturbing still water. But his vacant stare remained unchanged. Ravager, his patience thinning, slammed his hand on the table, creating a resounding noise. Snap out of it! He roared. But the spirit remained unmoved, his world seemingly far removed from theirs. Felix stood upright, taking a step back. It's as if he's trapped in his mind, he murmured. His consciousness is somewhere else. I guess we can only run his identity through the system and figure out more about his past from there. Ravager said. Take care of it. Felix watched on with intrigue as Ravager approached the man, aiming the device towards his arm. At first glance, there was nothing. But as the crystal device emitted a soft, blue glow, an intricate barcode-like pattern emerged from the spirit's forearm, previously invisible to the naked eye. Got it, Ravager announced as he began the scan. Lines of mysterious code and data streamed from the spirit's barcode into the crystal device, illuminating it with fluctuating colors. Ravager observed the information, then relayed it to Felix in a structured manner. Full name, Arian Del Mar. Age, 233 spirit years. Origin city, Luminera. Last known occupation, Luminera's gambling den manager. Status, current dark color/peak color, golden. Memory status, compromised //. Even though there were more information to be read, both Felix and Ravager were taken back when they saw that he was a golden ranked spirit. How is it even possible to fall this significantly in rank? Ravager frowned, he was even a gambling den manager. They are known to be swimming in Loomis. It would have been more understandable if he fell to blue, green, or even indigo if he was presented with hundreds of unfortunate circumstances, but dark color? Everyone avoided dropping to this rank akin to a plague, and there was no way a golden spirit would allow himself to fall to such a low point. He is most definitely a fallen spectre. Felix was more certain now than ever. What do you think about this? The protocol in this situation is to take him to the Reformation Center and attempt to recover any of his lost memories. If everything was erased, give him a new identity fit of his current rank. Felix uttered calmly. The spirit, Arian Del Mar, remained distant and unresponsive even at the sound of such a terrifying statement. Ravager opened his mouth, but soon closed it. Then, he nodded in approval. I can't ask the traveler to break the protocol and start investigating him without exposing him to the system. Ravager wanted to utilize the information acquired from the barcode to begin his investigation on the spirit's past and find out what caused him to become like this. But, he could not do this if the case wasn't approved first by their squad's captain. That's because the case Felix accepted would end the moment the spirit either had his memories restored or received a new identity. Whatever happened next would be considered as a new case with a different rank to it. Let's hope we get something from his memories. Inside the vast halls filled with sophisticated machinery and luminescent chambers, Felix and Ravager walked side by side, guiding the vacant-eyed Aryan. They were led by Specialist Ilera, the center's leading memory technician. Since they were considered newbies, they needed monitoring while running the machine. Put him there. Upon reaching a central chamber, Specialist Ilera gestured for them to place Aryan on the chair and put the helmet on his head. Once Aryan was settled, Ilera initiated the process. The chamber hummed to life, pulsating with a rhythmic energy. Streams of light and shadow intertwined, searching for the lost fragments of Aryan's memories. The minutes felt like hours as Felix and Ravager waited with bated breath. Finally, the hum subsided, the chamber's light dimmed, and Specialist Ilera approached them with a heavy heart. My apologies, but it appears that Arian Del Mar's memories have not just been suppressed or locked away. They have been completely and permanently deleted. Is there no other way? Ravager asked with an upset tone. Ilera shook her head. The process we use is the most advanced in the realm. If his memories were merely fragmented or locked, we could have pieced them together. But deletion, it's final. Ravager leaned against a console, annoyance evident on his face. Who would go to such lengths? And why? That's on you to investigate. Ilera uttered calmly, for now, it's best to give him a new identity, so he could be functional again. We will do so, but not now. Felix stopped her just as she was about to press the button. We still need to run some tests on him. As you wish. Ilara shrugged and took off, not too bothered. Felix glanced at the mindless Aryan and thought to himself, we may not get information from him, but the fallen Spectre's cartel doesn't know that and will try their best to recover him. Felix was certain that the cartel wouldn't allow Aryan to roam the streets, and if it wasn't for the law enforcers picking him first, he would have already been taken aback by them. So, he planned to send him back outside again as a bait and see who would bite on it. Chapter 1461 Trailing to the Source. 1461 Trailing to the Source. What are you trying to do? Ravager inquired. There is more than meets the eye in this case, and it will be a shame if we let it go like this. Felix answered. I also think the same. Good, I am planning to use Aryan as a bait, and we can kick off a new case if we managed to find the person behind his situation if there is any. I don't have a problem with that. Ravager was more than pleased with this as it enabled him to continue on his little secret revenge plot as well. The sprawling streets of the capital were bustling as always, and amidst this labyrinth, Aryan Delmar stood, seemingly aimless and bereft of purpose. The passing spirits hardly paid him any attention, most of them engrossed in their own affairs. At a nondescript junction, Felix and Ravager positioned themselves, blending seamlessly with the surroundings, waiting to see the course Aryan would take. Alas, days passed, and Aryan's movements were aimless, sometimes meandering, sometimes sitting for hours on end, as if waiting for something to ignite a spark within him. Since Felix and Ravager had day shift with their squad, Felix had to leave following Aryan to Sekiro. Unfortunately, days went by and no one had appeared to pick up Aryan. Maybe he has caused this upon himself. Ravager sighed in frustration at the lack of results. It can't be, you have read about his past. He valued his safety and comfort more than anything. Felix shook his head. After going through his past information, they collected some data, but nothing too deep since the device couldn't show private intel to just anyone in the government. Because they were working on this off the record, they couldn't even interrogate the people around him. Well, no one is taking the bait, and we can't commit to this case without any decent leads. Ravager warned, those two B****s keep solving cases, and we can't accept anything until we conclude this. While Ravager wanted to get revenge on his sister, he knew that it would be 10 times easier by becoming a captain. He didn't want to lose his chance chasing after a false lead. Unlike Felix, he didn't have any knowledge about the Fallen, so it was normal to be skeptical after days with no results. You can return and pick up another case, I will stay on this for another week. Felix shared calmly. Ravager thought about it for a moment and then shook his head. No, we are in this as partners, and it's best to tackle each case together. As UWI. Suddenly, Felix's expression turned serious. We have movement. The moment Ravager heard this, he turned around and saw a mysterious figure approaching Aryan. He was cloaked in deep green and bearing the emblem of a crescent moon. The stranger seemed to exchange a few words with Aryan, causing both of their pupils to expand. He is talking. I can see that. But how? He didn't seem to be faking his condition. Seeing that Felix remained silent, Ravager stopped his series of questions and focused on Aryan, who began following the stranger. In reality, Ravager's heart was beating rapidly in agitation as this situation reminded him of his little sister greatly. His sister became like a robot who will do anything he asked from her, and if he didn't order her, she would keep gazing somewhere in silence. He must be his master. This made him recognize the identity of the stranger. Let's give it chase. With stealth befitting their roles, Felix and Ravager tailed the duo as they navigated the serpentine alleyways, moving away from the central streets, past the merchants' quarter, and finally into the more desolate outskirts of the city. Here, structures were sparser, and the grandeur of the central realm gave way to simpler, earth-toned homes. The stranger led Aryan to a humble abode, its walls rough hewn and roof-thatched, reminiscent of ancient dwellings from long-forgotten eras. Once Aryan and the stranger disappeared inside, Felix and Ravager kept a decent distance from the house. They knew that as law enforcers, if they were caught snooping on them, getting kicked out of the government wouldn't be the only punishment received. "Do your thing," Ravager said. Closing his eyes momentarily, Felix channeled the element of vibration, aligning his senses to the faintest of sounds. From within the walls of the house, the vibrations began to form a discernible pattern, weaving the story of what was transpiring inside. At first, the hum was soft, almost like a gentle whisper, the creaking of floorboards, the rustling of cloth. But then, a new sound emerged, one that made Felix focus on it. It was the voice of the stranger, low and menacing, dripping with venom. "You worthless creature! I gave you an easy order to buy me a pack of cigarettes, and you ended up lost in the other side of the city for over a week." Arian's feeble responses, either too soft or stifled by pain, were drowned by the stranger's wrath. With every accusation, there was a chilling sound, the sharp slap of flesh against flesh, the thud of a body colliding with a wall. Unreactive to the heart-breaking noise, Felix continued to eavesdropping. "How can you be so dumb? I was told that your worthless kind are the best and cheapest available servants in the market, but you almost got me in deep trouble with the law enforcers." The beating continued non-stop. "Screw this, I am returning you and getting my refund." With one last thud, the assault was stopped so as the stranger's tirade. Felix disengaged his ears from the house and opened his eye again. "What happened?" Ravager asked. "He got beaten, badly." Ravager's expression hardened, eyes reflecting fury and determination as this situation made him imagine what his sister had gone through under Mr. Attakus. Still, he took control over his emotions and asked, "What's our next move?" "We will follow the master," he uttered something about getting a refund. Felix shared, "He will take us to the real culprit, and we can take action from there." "Refund? Is he treating him like a product?" Ravager got furious again. "Seems like it. This feels wrong on so many levels. Let's go." Felix ended their discussion after spotting Arian and his master taking off into the dark alleys again. The musty alleyways of the black market were alive with the whispers of illicit deals, and the shimmering specters of otherworldly beings. Among the stalls and shadowed recesses stood an infamous small shop, and business both mysterious and hated, known for selling servants of all kinds. Arian was dragged forward by his so-called master inside the shop. His steps were staggered, weakened by the assault he had endured. The bruises on his face and arms were painful reminders of his lost memories and the cruelty he had experienced. Pushing Arian ahead, the master barked at the shop owner, "This one's defective. I demand a refund." The shop owner, an aging spirit with a sly glint in his eyes, leaned forward, examining Arian critically. "You've mishandled him," he remarked, pointing to the evident bruises. "Our servants are rare commodities. Their minds are fragile, they need guidance, not violence." The master scoffed, "I didn't pay for a broken toy. Refund my Loomis now." The shop owner sighed, a long-suffering expression on his face. "Returns aren't accepted here, especially not for damaged goods. However, if you're struggling to use him, I can advise." The master's eyes narrowed suspiciously, "Go on." Leaning in, the shop owner whispered, "Fallen servants are unique. Their power comes from their lost memories, a void that can be harnessed. Teach him, train him, but do so with care and patience. The void in their souls can be filled, directed. If used right, he can be more potent than any ordinary servant." The master hesitated, mulling over the shop owner's words. "And if I can't use him?" The shop owner smirked, "Then, my dear customer, perhaps it's not the servant that's flawed, but the master. We will see who's flawed." Growling in frustration, the master yanked Arian by the arm, exiting the shop. Then, he took his leave, having no idea that he had guided two sets of predatory eyes on the shop. Chapter 1462 The Witness Protection Program. 1462 The Witness Protection Program. Should we storm in? Ravager asked. No, we have to play this smart. Felix rejected. He comprehended that even though they were led to the fallen spirit's cellar, they could not confront him about it. He would easily deny everything, and without any evidence, they could not arrest him. We need Arian's master to give away the cellar. Unlike him, we have a reason to bring him for questioning. Arian's unclosed case. Ravager commentated. Let's go. Felix agreed and disappeared into the shadows, chasing after Arian's master. The dark alleyways were a stark contrast to the vibrant hustle of the main streets. Sounds of haggling and the clinking of essence coins echoed in the distance. Arian's master dragged him along, his grip punishingly tight. Clearly, he was still upset after getting looked down upon by the servants' trader. Just as he was about to take a corner, two figures stepped out from the shadowed doorways, blocking their path. Ravager, with his piercing eyes and an intimidating aura, stared down the master, while Felix took a measured step forward, his demeanor calm but authoritative. Going somewhere? Felix asked, a hint of coldness in his voice. Arian's master heart almost leapt from his throat in fright after seeing Felix and Ravager's outfits. The notion of being caught doing something wrong by law enforcers would sap the wind out of anyone. Don't panic, you did nothing wrong. Arian's master relaxed his emotions somehow and then spat back defiantly. What's in it for you? Ravager took a step closer, his eyes as cold as ever. You seem to have mistreated your servant. That's a violation of spirit realm regulations. The master sneered, he's mine. Bought and paid for. None of your business what I do to him unless he came forward and reported me. Come on, ask him, see if he will do so. Knowing that Arian wasn't going to utter a single word, Felix didn't bother to play his game. He summoned a binding chain of light, wrapping it around the master and immobilizing him. This was one of the law enforcement equipment used to seize the criminals with minimum effort. You can't do this to me. You are abusing your authority. He screamed for his rights. Shut up. Felix zapped him through the light chain, causing the master to convulse in pain. Then, he dragged him to the law enforcement department while Ravager brought Arian with him. After booking an interrogation room, Arian's master never stopped screaming and banging on the table, crying over the unjust treatment he received. I will sue you. You hear me? I will sue you. Sue us for what? Ravager sneered, you have already confirmed that Arian is your servant. He has been picked up by us a week ago and found out the abnormalities within him. As his master, you must have had a great part in his memories deletion and personality disorder. Upon hearing this, Arian's master felt his knees buckle under the table at the realization that his association with a fallen spectre was about to bite him in the ass. He assumed before that Felix and Ravager had no case against him, which meant it was illegal to arrest him, and he could put them in deep trouble if he complained to the court. But now? They had every right to bring him in as his master. I had nothing to do with his mental problem. I swear on Lord Hades' name. Arian's master changed up real quick, instead of protesting, now he was trying to save his own skin. He was all beaten up and wounded. It's highly likely he became like this through a never-ending cycle of abuse. I have seen many similar cases, so as the court. Good luck defending yourself with a swear. Ravager sneered. He was bluffing to intimidate Arian's master through a mixture of lies and truth. It seemed to work just fine on their target as he had started to hyperventilate. I really didn't do it. I bought this useless servant a month ago, and he was like this from the start. Arian's master emphasized again, sweat flooding down his forehead. He understood that it didn't look good for him since his servant was really abnormal, and as his master, he was the first suspect. The last thing he needed was to become a criminal after a single illegal purchase. Where did you buy him and from whom? Felix asked. Arian's master bit his lips hard as his eyes darted between Felix and Ravager, seemingly wanting to talk but at the same time not having the courage. You have to understand that we are on Arian's case, and if you don't start cooperating to back up your story, you will leave us with no choice but to charge you and investigate your entire life." Ravager pressured. "I can't, I signed a strict contract with the seller." Arian's master confessed, "I will get 100% thrown out of the heavenly plane if I talked. You will suffer a similar fate if you were investigated and the leads pointed at you." Felix said. "I am innocent, and you will find nothing." Arian's master replied, but his tone didn't seem that confident. It was understandable as he wasn't a low-ranked spirit. He was a small big shot in the city, and to reach his current position, he had to do some shady moves. So, while he was confident that Arian's situation wouldn't bite him as hard, he wasn't sure about the rest. "How about a deal?" Felix suggested, "Tell us what we need to know on the record, and you will join our witness protection program." "Traveler! You shouldn't make promises you can't keep." Ravager chided, "Witness protection program is used only on big cases under captain's leadership." "I know what I am doing, trust me," Felix replied. Felix comprehended that he couldn't protect someone from a contract termination penalty unless the end results justified it. The witness protection program was used only on large-scale cases since their results affected cities or sometimes even the entire plane. Such cases were almost non-existent and appear once in thousands of years if not longer, since no one was bold enough to cause such a mayhem under Lord Hades' nose. But, Felix was confident that the Fallen Spectre case was a massive hit due to its relation to a noble. "If you can guarantee me that, I will spill everything I know," Arian's master replied with a serious tone. "Stay around, we will contact you soon." Felix threatened, "Don't you dare tell anyone about this, or there will be no deal, and we will come at you with everything we got." "Don't worry, I am not that stupid," Arian's master scoffed. He was a mere customer and not part of the Fallen Spectre's organization. So, he had no plans to be their scapegoat in the slightest. After he took his leave without his servant, Ravager turned to face Felix and shook his head. "I have no idea what you are trying to do. You will understand later on. For now, we have to convince our captain to take this case and put our witness in the program," Felix revealed as he walked away with Arian following him close. Felix knew that it would be impossible to solve anything related to the Fallen case with his current rank, but, if he included his squad in it and had the support of his captain, it would be a different story entirely. The only issue with this was the fact his captain wasn't easily convinced to even take a different path on the road, don't even mention an entire new case. One that required witness program to launch it. "Sigh, we are going to fail miserably. Just let me do the talking. That doesn't make me feel any better about this." 1463 Grim Findings. Felix and Ravager went straight to the squad's office after discovering their captain was there. The room had shelves filled with records of cases, artifacts, and souvenirs from resolved incidents. The dim light from a vintage lamp washed over Captain Charleston, seated behind a massive wooden desk. His eyes, always sharp, schemed through a case file. Felix cleared his throat, drawing the captain's attention. "Captain, I need your backing on Arian's case." Captain Charleston glanced up, his expression unreadable. "That memory-wiped spectre? Why? Because this isn't an isolated incident. I am certain that there's an underground market where these spirits, with their memories and personalities wiped clean, are being sold off as servants," Felix explained. Charleston leaned back, his eyes narrowed in focus. "That's a grave allegation. Do you have any proof?" "We have Arian's master, willing to turn in the cellar. It's an intricate web, and if we pull the right thread, the whole system might unravel," Felix replied. Captain Charleston's eyebrows knitted in concern. This could be a massive operation. Messing with spirits' memories and identities? It's against every code we stand for. Felix leaned in. "Exactly, Captain. We must shut it down. Think about it. How many more Arians are out there, reduced to nothing more than empty shells for someone's dark pleasure? While Captain Charleston seemed in favor of supporting Felix, he didn't give him his word right away. He switched his focus to Ravager and ordered, "Spit it, what do you guys need from me?" Ravager glanced at Felix before sighing deeply, "We kinda need the witness protection program to buy Aryan Master's help. He wouldn't come forward without it due to the strict contract he signed with the seller." "I knew it." Captain Charleston gave them an irritated look. "You think I am foolish to keep risking my career and reputation to support your crazy actions? I did it once in our previous mission, but don't make it a habit," he scolded. Captain Charleston was righteous, but he wasn't dumb to keep putting his career in the hands of Felix. Using the witness protection program implied breaking a contract willingly without any punishment involved. Such injustice and rule-breaking needed to be justified through significant results, and not many captains were bold enough to do this for their cases. "Captain, I know what you are thinking, but you should read the details of the case first and you will understand how big this case is," Felix stressed. "It's one of those cases that can get any captain a straight promotion to a high inspector position right away. It will be really disappointing to see such an opportunity get wasted." Upon hearing so, Charleston began considering it for real. If it's a real case with a big underground organization behind it, then bringing them to justice will do me more than just get a promotion. I might even be considered to run for the department chief position if he ever decided to step down. But, can I really trust this troublemaker? Captain Charleston thought as he stared at Felix's nonchalant expression, like his agreement or rejection meant nothing to him. I should take it and run my own investigation before using the witness program. Captain Charleston decided to take the safer approach and study the case on his own before making a real decision. "Bring me everything you know and I will take it from there," he ordered. "Thank you, Captain. We won't let them get away with this." Felix nodded in understanding and took off with the surprised Ravager behind him. When they left the office, he couldn't help but ask Felix, "Did you know he will agree?" "Of course," Felix replied calmly. "Haven't you researched his past? He is strict on everyone but mostly on himself due to his high ambition to climb the law enforcement department's ladder. As long as the risk was justified, he would most definitely take a leap of faith in this case for the sake of his ambition." "I see." Even though Captain Charleston had yet to fully agree, both of them were certain that he would accept the case after reading its details. As they expected, the moment Captain Charleston studied the file and met with Aryan, he realized the seriousness involved and didn't hesitate to assign the case to his squad. He brought everyone to a meeting and began assigning them roles on the case. "Hazel, I need a full detailed background check on the victim. You have permission to question his co-workers, family members, and anyone related to him. Nidam, I need you to bring in the master and check what kind of information is in his possession. If it was noteworthy, we will put him in the program, if not, we will find other ways to interrogate the seller without his assistance. Rookies, since you brought the case to me, I won't leave you aside." Captain Charleston ordered with a stern tone, "You will be responsible for finding related cases or victims. The procedure imposed was to help anyone with lost memories to regain them, and if they can't, give them a new identity. So, there must be some victims who went through the system without anyone putting in extra effort." Felix and the others nodded in understanding. If it wasn't for Felix's knowledge about the fallen specters and his desire to find a big case, he would have followed the protocol like anyone else. After all, everyone was overworked with many cases at once and not many would put in extra effort when no one told them to. "Report back when you find some decent results." With that last statement, everyone scattered outside of the office to carry on their missions. A few hours later, Felix and Ravager were seen burying their heads deep in hundreds of holographic screens. They were inside the department's record cabinet room, a sprawling chamber with towering shelves that had the musty smell of old paper and the weight of countless histories recorded within. Files were stacked and crammed into every nook and cranny, some dating back hundreds of thousands of years if not millions. Dust particles floated in the air, lit by the dim overhead light. Suddenly, Felix stood up, pulled out a thick folder, and placed it on the wooden table next to a growing pile. Then, he scanned it with his crystal device, and the folder's content was translated into a clear hologram. The haunting image of a vacant-eyed spirit stared back at him from the case photograph, making Felix realize that he had landed on another victim. Ravager, looking through another set of files, raised an eyebrow. This is our 5th record with a similar case today, and I have a gut feeling we're just scratching the surface. Felix's face turned grave. It's far worse. He spread out numerous files in front of Ravager, all with eerily similar circumstances. All these spirits had their memories wiped clean, much like Aryan. And the more disturbing fact? Every single case was concluded within days of being filed. Ravager's eyes widened in shock. He quickly skimmed through a couple of reports. No thorough investigation, no leads followed, just, closed? How is this even possible? He understood that many law enforcers follow the rules and procedure to the letter, but there was bound to be someone with a slight interest in the reason why the casualty lost his memories. Keep searching, I have a bad feeling about this. Felix uttered with a solemn tone. Felix didn't want to say it out loud, but he honestly began to believe that there was someone with high power inside the department, making sure those cases ended in a similar manner. In fact, he always had his doubts about this right from the start. In his eyes, it shouldn't be possible for Miss Sani to find out about the fallen Spectre's organization while the law enforcement department had absolutely no idea. He always had a suspicion, but he never took it too far, believing that Miss Sani got lucky or something. But now? His doubts were becoming clearer and clearer with each similar case he found. After more than 12 hours of non-stop digging, both Ravager and Felix looked at each other with grim expressions. We have counted over 100 of these cases spanning 3 decades. They were effectively silenced, buried deep within the archives. Ravager clenched his fist. Who would have the power and influence to do this? To make sure these cases never saw the light of day? I'm not sure, but whatever is happening, it's systemic and deeply rooted, Felix replied. We have to take this to the captain and he will know what to do with it. I agree. Felix and Ravager cleared their table and returned all the files back to their places before taking their leave. Unbeknownst to them, their captain was called by his superior the moment the case was accepted. 1464 being pressured to drop the case. Some time ago. Captain Charleston felt a mix of emotions as he approached the double door leading to High Inspector Nolver's office. He was called a short moment after he sent his squad to start their investigation, which raised his curiosity. He rarely gets called to his superior office since he almost never makes mistakes. He gave a single knock and a voice, a bit scuffed and irritating to the ear, beckoned, "Enter." Inside, the spacious room was bathed in a soft, ambient glow. Dominating one side was a massive desk made of dark, aged wood, carved with symbols that represented the spirit realm's justice codes. Behind the desk sat High Inspector Nolver, a tall figure draped in robes of deep green and gold, with discerning silver eyes that always seemed to be thinking several steps ahead. Captain Charleston, Inspector Nolver began without preamble. Please, sit. Captain Charleston, used to the inspector's direct manner, took the chair opposite him. You asked to see me, Inspector. Inspector Nolver leaned back, steepling his fingers. I've been notified that you have accepted a new case. Yes, it's related to Memo. Before he could finish his report, Inspector Nolver waved his hand and requested, You must halt your investigation on this case immediately. Captain Charleston remained silent for a few moments before asking him in a composed manner, May I know why? You never intervened in my cases before. Your work is, as always, commendable. However, this case is related to a much bigger one and we already have a special task force to close it. Delving further might compromise its integrity and potentially put many more spirits at risk. Inspector Nolvac shared, Unfortunately, I can't tell you the details as they are classified. Captain Charleston's eyebrows drew together, his sense of justice flaring up. He felt like there was something fishy going on, as he had never heard of special task forces being assigned classified cases. In the law enforcement department, all cases were open and shared with everyone to further facilitate their closures through indirect help. With all due respect, Inspector, I have already accepted the case and met with the victim. My consciousness won't be clear if I just dropped him without giving him justice. Captain Charlson shook his head. I don't know about the other case, but as long as I don't get its details and understand the situation fully, Arian's case will remain under my jurisdiction. Inspector Nolver sighed, a rare show of emotion. Charlson, we both know that I can't force you to drop the case. So, if you want to continue with it, go ahead. Just know that this order didn't come from me but from the higher UPS. Higher-ups. Captain Charlson was somewhat taken aback by his statement. He ought to feel this way. The higher UPS above inspectors were grand arbiters. High inspectors' duties were to keep the squads and their captains in check by inspecting their cases, their success rates, their failure rates, and their problems, assigning emergency cases, approving resources, and such. Each high inspector had more than 10 squads under their supervision, and Inspector Nolvac was responsible for Captain Charlson's squad and all other squads with the trainees from the examination. This was the reason he was assigned as the qualification stage supervisor. The grand arbiter above inspectors were much feared and respected, even though they were rarely involved in day-to-day matters. That's because they have the power to overrule any decision made by lower-ranked officials and could convene a council of high inspectors when necessary. When it came to authority, they were only lower to the law enforcement supreme chief, who was also an ethereal elder in the council. If you value your career, it's best to fold a little. I am not doing anything wrong, and as long as I follow the rules, my conscience will stay clear. Captain Charlson asked calmly. Is that all? My team awaits me. Taking a long gander on his solemn face, Inspector Nolvac could only shake his head and excuse him with a wave of a hand. When Captain Charlson left the office, Inspector Nolvac's expression turned cold all of a sudden. Not even an arbiter scared him away. This stubborn stickler to the rules. It will take him an actual order from the chief to drop the case, and the chief will never get himself involved in such petty cases. Inspector Nolver stood up and walked around the office, deep in his thoughts on a method to resolve this issue peacefully like always. This news must not reach the Duke. He is already stressed out with the slow pace of our operation. He can't find out that an outsider is investigating us. Inspector Nolver was one of the many Duke's loyal servants who were raised for the sole purpose of entering the government and taking key positions to help him in his goal. Ever since Inspector Nolver got promoted to this position, he worked on the clock to bury any case related to fallen spirits caught by the law enforcers. In fact, even the swift protocol to conclude such cases was introduced and pushed by him in the Inspectors' Council. Damn it, if only that bastard rookie didn't accept the mission right away. Inspector Nolver narrowed his eyes coldly as he envisioned Felix. He had his own underlings making sure not a single case related to the fallen specters ever got exposed. None of them were faster than Felix when the case first appeared. To make matters worse, Inspector Nolver wasn't informed about this until too late, as his subordinates believed that Felix would follow the protocol. After all, it was a simple case, and as a rookie thirsting for points, it shouldn't have taken them less than a few hours to finish. Alas! Felix had other plans in mind. If I can't make them stop, I need to alert all of our operation handlers and make them pull back. Inspector Nolver decided to make the sellers and other staff lay low for a while. In the meantime, he would start his attack on Captain Charlson's squad by relocating new tough cases to them. While he couldn't force any squad to take or drop a case, he could most definitely offer them unresistible cases. Let's see if you will stay stubborn when you keep losing great cases that can help your squad mates' careers. Inspector Nolver sneered. Back in the squad's office, Felix and Ravager were seen sitting in front of Captain Charlson. Hazel and Nidam had also returned as they were called for an emergency meeting. All of them were awaiting his response silently after Felix presented all the data they had collected in the archives. Just like them, Captain Charleston could smell foul play all over those cases the moment he read their details. It was too rare for 10 cases to end in the same manner and have the same data, but over 100? It wasn't right. This must be the doing of an inspector. Only they possess such authority to oversee similar cases from multiple squads. Arbiters rarely get involved and the chief's movement is too large to go unnoticed. Captain Charleston narrowed his eyes at the image of Nolver. It was understandable for him to suspect him first since he was called the instant he accepted the case and was even pushed to drop it. Still, it was a mere suspicion. This case has turned out to be much bigger than any of us has anticipated. Captain Charleston uttered with a stern tone, "We have to be extra careful." Everyone nodded in understanding. "Do you have any updates?" he asked Hazel and Nidam. "I have contacted Arian's master and found out that his information was limited to the cellar." Nidam shared. "It seems like they are a reclusive circle and not even their clients know much about them." Hazel commentated. "They wouldn't have remained hidden for so long without being this careful." Captain Charleston stated, "While they received support from someone in the department, those cases were mere anomalies. This means for the past 3 decades, there must be hundreds of thousands of servants with the same condition, working in utter silence akin to brainwashed slaves. The more I think about it, the more unsettling it gets." Hazel felt shivers down her spine. How can Lord Hades allow this to happen under his watch? Lord Hades involves himself only in matters related to situations affecting the spirit realm as a whole. As for such problems, it was up to the law enforcement department to manage it. Captain Charleston explained, "What's the point of having us if his hands were forced to get dirted in our matters?" Felix nodded in agreement. He had already come to this conclusion when he realized that the heavenly plane wasn't so heavenly. True, Lord Hades had the power to shut down all the darkness within the heavenly plane and make everyone live in peace and harmony. But this was never his goal. He created a plane and tried to replicate a society like in the living world, not create an actual paradise where everyone was happy and chummy with each other. Whether it was an experiment or he did it out of boredom, he had no interest in involving himself in the spirits' matters unless they were related to the living world or the Unigens. "Let's concentrate on what we can do," Captain Charleston ordered. "I need you to capture the cellar right this instant. He is the key to keep this investigation moving forward." 1465 The Fallen Spectres Organization's 5 heads. "I will handle it." Nidam gave a slight nod and took off immediately. "Hazel, what did you find on the victim's past?" Captain Charleston asked. "Nothing much." Hazel shook her head. "Everyone I asked said the same thing. Arian was in a deep debt and his gambling den was on the verge of being shut down. No one knows if he has cleared off the debt or not, but the gambling den declared bankruptcy and he has disappeared ever since. He must have been turned into this after failing to pay his debt." Felix reasoned. "My thoughts exactly." Captain Charleston ordered. "Hazel, did your investigations find the identity of the lender?" Hazel shook her head. "No one knew the lender personally besides Arian. I will try to unravel his identity." "Good, we need every lead we get." Captain Charleston turned to Felix and Ravager. "I want you boys to dig deeper into those 100 cases and try to find any leads as well. Prioritize the newest ones." "On it." Captain Charleston clapped his hands and said one last time with a serious tone. "This is a whole different battle than what we are used to, so be careful and avoid making even the slightest mistake." Everyone understood what he implied and exited the office with grim expressions. The notion of having a superior part of the fallen organization and keeping his eyes on them would send the creeps down anyone's spine. They were certain that if they made a single mistake, he wouldn't hesitate to seek their early departure from the department. It was even harder on Felix and Ravager as they were still trainees and amidst active competition. "We wanted a big case to win the competition, now I doubt we will make it through." Ravager sighed. As long as we follow the rules, we will always be in the right. Felix replied calmly. I hope so. On the other side of the coin, a closed-off meeting was held between the 5 heads of the fallen Spectres organization. The air in the underground chamber was cold, with only a few mystical orbs illuminating the area. Shaikh, with his characteristic sharp-toothed grin, lounged on one side of a massive, ancient stone table. On its surface, a map of the spirit realm, glowing with various points of interest, resembling an active warfare map. Many cities were colored green, but the majority were either colored red or orange with a percentage number above them. The other 3 heads, Aurelana with her fiery eyes, Crevis who looked solid like a stone, and Marcel who constantly seemed to phase in and out of existence, took their positions around the table. In the midst of them stood Inspector Nolver, wearing an emblem that showed his rank as the High Inspector, but at this moment, he was one among equals. Inspector Nolver cleared his throat. The situation has become precarious. Charleston and his squad are creeping up on our operations. I have already commanded for the sellers to lay low and plan to make it difficult for his squad. But, we still need a legit strategy in case this situation lasts more than we anticipate. Why not just eliminate the problem at its root? I've never been a fan of subtlety. Shaikh said with an icy tone and murderous eyes capable of slicing through solid walls. He was a whole different character than what he displayed in public, which wasn't shocking considering he was the closest thing to a politician. Aurelana, tapping the table with her crimson nails, retorted, because a sudden disappearance would raise even more suspicion. We need to divert their attention. She was a green warden, representing the interest and benefits of the spirits with the green color in the realm. Crevis, with his deep, subtle voice, suggested, we could plant misleading evidence, and send them on a wild goose chase. His thought process was befitting of his status as one of the highest paid public prosecutors in the heavenly plane. His job was to defend the interests of the public and government like any other normal prosecutor. He had caused an unfathomable number of spirits to be sent either to jail or kicked out of the plane entirely, making him feared across the entire realm. Mark added his own input, or introduce another threat in the realm. A decoy. Something they can't ignore. That would buy us time to complete our operations. Marcel was a high-ranked judge with a great standing in the jurisdictional system, possessing enough authority to affect the entire legal system. I agree, we can't halt our operations for even a moment. So, telling our sellers to stay low was a bad move. Shaikh stated, the Duke is rushing the operation for a reason. We don't know it yet, but he will hang us alive if he hears that we are slowing down. That's true. Inspector Nolver said with a deep frown, but, we should at least send away Quillen. He will most definitely be approached due to his relation with the case. I have no issue with that. Seconded. Everyone agreed at once. Quillen was the one selling Arian away and he was the only direct link the squad had at the moment to the fallen organization. Charleston will most definitely erect a wide search to find him. Don't worry, I won't approve of it. Inspector Nolver said. You need a reason to do it without making it too obvious. Solomon suggested, we should create disturbances in the outer regions. Nothing lethal, just enough to create new emergency cases. Indeed, we can even use the opportunity to force them into deployment and buy us some time. Inspector Nolver might not force squads to accept cases, but when it came to emergencies, he had the authority to halt any ongoing investigation and deal with the emergency first. I guess we have a plan. This is all for now. Everyone looked at each other for a few moments before Grievous informed, if this issue isn't solved by the next 2 weeks, I will inform the Duke personally. No one disagreed with him or attempted to talk him out of it. They knew that Grievous was already doing them a huge favor by not informing the Duke right away. That's because he was the Duke's right hand and most trusted soldier, abiding by his will like it was a god's decree. A couple of minutes later, Grievous was seen in Duke Humphrey's office. He was standing upright with his hands folded behind his back, wearing a formal black suit that went well with his grey short hair. "So, that's what happened?" Duke Humphrey uttered. "Yes." Crevice nodded. He had just sold out his peers without a second of thought, updating the Duke about everything that happened. 15 days? What a joke, he wouldn't be referred to as the Duke's second arm if he hid information from him. "Handle it as you fit," Duke Humphrey said. "I will get it done as fast as possible," Crevice uttered as he bowed down akin to a butler. Then, he excused himself. While it seemed like Duke Humphrey didn't show much of a reaction to the situation, he was a bit concerned. That boy is getting too close to our operations while he has a connection to Kraken. He wasn't scared of Felix but by the idea of Elder Kraken getting involved in this case. Hades won't bother himself to get involved in these matters willingly, but if it was introduced during the Elders' Council, his presence alone will force all Elders to work to the best of their ability to stop our operations. I can't afford to have the strategy fail, not now, not after I spent eons on it. Duke Humphrey's eyes twinkled with an extraordinary light. "I was cast away from the heavens and this is the only way to return. And I will return no matter what it takes." 1466 A hired gang of misfits. Some time later, Nidam had returned to the office with an irked expression. The horrid smell of cigarettes was all over his body. "The seller is gone and has disabled his crystal device. There is no way to reach him," he reported. "They sure moved fast." Captain Charleston sighed. He already expected this much to happen, but he still held a bit of hope that his assumption of a traitor amidst them was false. Now, he was convinced. "Label him as a fugitive and dispatch a wide search across the heavenly plain," he ordered. "On it." Nidam left the office and made the request after filling in the seller's details. He might have been an underground seller, but he was also an active merchant in the daylight. "Will it get rejected or approved?" Captain Charleston narrowed his eyes, awaiting the response from Inspector Nolver. Alas, he waited, and waited. After half a day, no response was delivered yet, causing his suspicion about him to get more real. In the end, Captain Charleston decided to confront him about his delay as he knew that the more time they wasted, the harder it would get for them to find Quillen again. Just as he was about to walk out of his office, the serene, almost mundane atmosphere of the law enforcement department was abruptly shattered when sirens began to wail, accompanied by the frenzied flashing of red emergency lights. Captain Charleston's expression turned solemn, knowing that an emergency had occurred. When he glanced at the nearest digital board, it displayed a live feed from the Bazaar, showing a group of rowdy spirits. Their forms were blurry and distorted, laughing and wreaking havoc. Their ethereal fingers swept through stalls, taking whatever they pleased, leaving shopkeepers and patrons in sheer terror. "All law enforcers on duty head to the Bazaar immediately." I repeat, all law enforcers on duty head to the Bazaar immediately. Everyone heard the announcement and took off in a disciplined manner in the direction of the Bazaar. Even Felix and Ravager were forced to halt their research and join them. "Attention all units." Inspector Nolver's voice boomed over the intercom of the squads he was responsible over. "We have a 10 to 31, a mass burglary at the Grand Bazaar. The culprits are a gang of low-class spirits. They are currently making their escape on hover motorcycles. I want them intercepted and apprehended immediately." As the video feed continued to play, an aerial shot showed the gang zooming out of the Bazaar area on motorcycles, their engines letting out an eerie, ghostly roar. Trails of spectral energy followed them, the visual representation of their raw power. "Captain Charleston, you are the lead of this operation," Inspector Nolver ordered and made sure everyone heard it. "Roger." Captain Charleston agreed in a professional manner, not showing an ounce of dissatisfaction even though he was certain this entire situation occurred to hold him back. "Damn it, why is that bastard's team always getting the best missions?" Nebula cursed in displeasure. She was seen flying with her squad in the direction of the main doors. "Stop complaining, it's orders from the inspector," Seraphel said calmly, all we have to do is keep outperforming them and they will have no chance to win even if they accept 10 Missy. Get out of the way. Before she could finish her sentence, an overbearing cold voice interrupted her from above. Whoosh! Whoosh! When she lifted her head, all she was met with was a hot wind breeze passing her. Traveler! Nebula gritted her teeth after noticing that it was Felix and Ravager. None of them bothered to turn around and continued on their path until they arrived at the main gates. They picked the fastest aerial motorcycles and took off on them without waiting for their squad. They weren't acting on their own. Captain Charleston told them to go ahead since he was confident in their strength and capability. We can't let them apprehend the gang members. Salapel eyed Nebula and she gave her a slight nod in understanding. Without bothering to ask for their captain's permission, they sped away from the squad and gave chase on another motorcycle. Ah yeah, must feel nice to be motivated and eager. Their captain yawned lazily, not bothered in the slightest by their blatant disrespect. Captain Rashford, do we follow them? Nah, let them have their own little competition. Captain Rashford waved his hand carelessly. Whoosh whoosh. We have company. Ravager shared with a faint snicker as he looked behind him and noticed Nebula and Sarah fell right behind them. Ignore them. Felix said indifferently. He knew that those two were planning to steal their targets. There was no reason to chase after them otherwise. There are 3 members of the gang 5 kilometers away. Ravager shared, they are speeding away. Let's give a chase. Felix revved the engine and increased his speed to the limit, flying right above the heads of the spirits in the bazaar. He was extremely precise in his drive, making effortless manipulations to avoid pedestrians, vehicles, and shops without reducing his speed at all. Meanwhile, Ravager wasn't as optimal and had to pull the brakes on multiple times, which forced him to get behind bit by bit. Is there anything he isn't good at? He commentated, a bit odd and annoyed at the same time. Unbeknownst to him, Felix was adapted to moving at much crazier speeds. This was nothing to him. You ain't getting to them before me. When Nebula saw Felix pulling away, she also increased her speed and used even her time acceleration ability to push further. In a split second, both of them pulled ahead of Ravager and Sarah fell, forcing them to try their best to catch up. Alas, the moment the criminals went through the complex labyrinth of alleys, Felix and Nebula left them to eat their dust. I will go around and intercept them. Ravager shouted. I am waiting for you on the other side. Sarah fell informed. Ravager and Sarah fell glanced at each other for a moment before they went in 2 separate directions. The neon-lit alleys of the capital painted a surrealistic landscape as the night was illuminated with vibrant hues of blues and purples. The hovering motorcycles, with their riders, seemed more like shadows slipping through these arteries than tangible entities. Their engines hummed, echoing through the labyrinthine alleys, as they tried to shake off their pursuers. We have 2 enforcers on our tail, they are coming at us harder than expected. We need assistance. The gang's leader requested for support with cold sweat dripping on his back after hearing the faraway hum of unfamiliar motorcycles. He was paid handsomely by one of their VIP clients to create some chaos in the market and escape with his gang. Since they were professional riders and used to live in the underground and run criminal activities, none of them felt scared of being apprehended. That's how much they trusted in their own skills and they actually back it up. Alas, if it was any other law enforcer, they might have gotten away easily, but not from these 2 monsters. They were right on their tails, their competitive spirits ignited by the chase and the promise of points based on their performance. With a cold smirk, Nebula accelerated her bike, which responded with an ethereal glow. Bet I nab them before you, traveler. Give it your best. Felix retorted indifferently, swerving his bike expertly around a tight bend, nearly grazing the walls. Dodge this. The instant he appeared in the next alley, one of the criminals threw a sparkling grenade behind, which exploded into a cloud of disorienting mist. Nebula, anticipating the move, ascended her bike just in time, hovering above the mist, while Felix swerved into a side alley to avoid it. Split up. Using the labyrinth to their advantage, the criminals split up, each taking a different alley. Felix and Nebula quickly communicated telepathically, deciding to split up too. "I've got the one on the right," Felix said. Nebula, focusing on her target, replied, "Left one's mine." They might seem like enemies and fought each time they met, but it didn't mean that they would sabotage each other by chasing the same target and leaving the other two to escape. At the end of the day, their performance would be judged by their own captains, and if they heard about any foul play between them, none of them would like the result. Whoosh! Whoosh! The alleys became a dizzying blur of lights and shades as both Felix and Nebula skillfully navigated through them. "He will show up in the sixth line if he keeps the same pace." Felix, relying on his innate sense of direction, predicted his target's next move and went around to intercept him. As he anticipated, his target burst through the sixth line with a swift slide across the wall. Alas, he didn't expect Felix to be already waiting for him there. Vibration shockwave. He unleashed a powerful vibration shockwave at the biker, causing him to lose balance and crash into a big garbage bin while the bike went to the other side. Almost immediately, the criminal used his ethereal form, wanting to escape through the buildings. Alas, Felix predicted as much and whipped him using the shimmering light chain, entangling around him akin to a snake. The chain was capable of holding into ethereal or physical forms, which was one of the reasons many criminals get easily caught. ZZZZZZZ. Felix zapped him with full power until white appeared in his eyes, causing him to drop to the ground akin to a lifeless corpse. Felix swiftly used a similar handcuffs to the light chain and threw him inside the bin. "Stay here for a while." Then, he took off in the direction of the last one. Meanwhile, Nebula employed her space-time abilities to disorient her quarry, making him believe he was heading at full speed, but in reality, he was crawling in the air. By the time he realized, it was already too late and he suffered from the same fate as his partner. "Boys! Boys! Respond!" The remaining criminal was the gang's leader and his expression was nothing but relieved after realizing that his two gang mates were caught. "I have to get out of here. This is getting too risky for my liking." VRMMM. He increased his speed to the limit and started doing some crazy moves in the alleys to pull as much distance as possible from his pursuers. Alas, just as he was about to leave the central alleys and emerge on the outskirts of the city, two light chains flew from the sky and caught him by the neck and torso, leaving him hanging in the air akin to a suicidal chicken. "Let go, I caught him first." "No wonder you use glasses in the spirit realm, you sure as blind as a bat." Ravager snorted at her request while tightening his hold over the light chain. "Resorting to insults? How crude!" Seraphel remarked in displeasure while also maintaining her grip on the gang's leader. Both of them were pulling in different directions, causing the gang leader's eyes to pop out of his head as he was being choked by Ravager's chain. With a deathly purple face covered by his mask, he beseeched, "I, surrender, go, I am, dying." Alas, his husky voice was surrounded by the noise of the roaring motors and the argument of those two. "Let go. He is mine. I have caught him first and have it in recording. So do I. I am losing it." With one final breath and foam all over his mouth, the gang's leader fainted and remained hanging in the air akin to a piñata. 1467 Hindering the investigation. Whoosh! Whoosh! A few moments later, Felix and Nebula arrived at the scene and witnessed their partners quarreling over the ownership of the leader's capture. Naturally, they went to back their partners. "How shameless, trying to steal our target in broad daylight." Nebula warned, "Let go or we will report this to the higher UPS." "Be my guest." Felix replied calmly. "There are other targets on the loose, we are wasting time like this and will be punished." Seraphel tried to scare them, "Based on your low case's success rate compared to us, who do you think will be punished more?" Felix ignored her threat and glanced in the direction of Nebula. When he noticed that she wasn't carrying any criminal, he smiled coldly and said telepathically, "Ravager, don't let go." Then, he turned around and sped away inside the labyrinth of alleys. Where did he go? Both Salapel and Nebula were left surprised and confused for a short moment before it clicked in Salapel's mind. Nebula. He is aiming at your target. Chase him. The moment Nebula heard this, her expression turned for the worst and she gave chase at her fastest speed. Alas, she didn't consider that Felix would be shameless enough to try and steal her criminal, so she didn't hide him properly. Felix managed to find him easily by tracing back her trail. Without slowing his speed for a moment, he picked him up from the ground and threw him in the back of his motorcycle. Ack! You shameless prick! Nebula was left even more furious after seeing this scene. Knowing that Felix's original target must be somewhere here too, she kept chasing after Felix, wanting to steal him too. Too bad, Felix was smarter than that and he led her away from his hidden criminal in the bin. Meanwhile, he informed Ravager about his location and told him to give up on his target and pick up the secured one. On it. With a faint snicker, Ravager released his light chain, causing the leader to fly in the direction of Seraphel due to the built-up pressure. While she was fumbling to catch him in the air, he had already taken off to the location. Ravager is going after their apprehended target. Seraphel informed her partner. Alas, there was nothing Nebula could do about it as she was taken quite a decent distance from the location. In the end, Ravager secured the criminal and regrouped with Felix outside of the labyrinth of alleys. You thieving F***ers. This isn't the end of this. Nebula gritted her teeth as she watched them head back to their squad. She wanted to stop them and retrieve her prey, but she couldn't touch them or harm them as it was against the rules. Felix and Ravager ignored her murderous intent and continued on their journey unhindered. Too bad, while their plan was quite intelligent, it didn't really work too much in their favor. Unbeknownst to them, they had given up on the gang's leader for 2 gang members and the leader always had more worth to him. Well, they couldn't really be blamed since all gang members were covered up from top to bottom and there was no way of knowing their identities unless they got exposed. Some time later. Good work, we have managed to capture 7 of the gang members. It's unfortunate that the rest have gotten away, but they can't hide forever. Inspector Nolver disclosed with a solemn tone as he stood in front of more than 40 law enforcers. Those gangs have always been a nuisance to the heavenly plane, but none of them dared to be as bold as today. So, we are going to set an example for the rest by using them. Inspector Nolver ordered, Captain Charleston, continue on your duties and close this case by capturing all of the involved suspects. You have permission to label them as fugitives and utilize the wide search system. Captain Charleston remained silent for a moment before proclaiming out loud, understood. While the other squads and their captains were showing envious looks at such a great opportunity falling in Captain Charleston's hands, he and his squad had a bad taste in their mouths. This isn't an opportunity, this is a blatant hindrance to our investigations of the fallen organization. Felix narrowed his eyes coldly. He understood that Captain Charleston wouldn't be able to prioritize the investigation before he concluded this case first since he was given all the assets possible. If he failed to close it in a decent period of time, his reputation would take a massive hit and his credit score might even get lowered. The worst part, he couldn't search for the seller anymore since it would seem like the assets allocated to him were being misused for individual cases. He sure cabled our hands. Ravager eyed Inspector Nolver. Uncaring about their reactions, Inspector Nolver turned around and left. The captains approached Captain Charleston and congratulated him on the case acceptance, knowing that if he managed to capture the entire gang, his credits would increase substantially. Then, they took off too. Traveler, your luck won't last forever. Nebula took a jab at Felix with an irritated tone before following after her captain. Felix ignored her and walked with his squad back to their office. They were discussing the situation telepathically. Captain, what's our next move? Nidam inquired. The seller is gone and our request to put him in the system will be denied 100%. The wide search system was used for fugitives as it forced everyone, whether a law enforcer or a citizen, to keep an eye on the fugitives and report to the authorities the moment any lead was discovered. In addition, the companies were banned from serving and helping the fugitives, and if they dared to ignore the law, the department had every right to confiscate their entire business. So, no one dared to protect the fugitives, and in the same manner, criminals kept their crimes on the low to avoid getting flagged like this. If this gang was hired by them, then, they will make sure to keep them updated about our movements and waste our time in a meaningless chase. Captain Charleston stated. Meaningless or not, we still have to do it. Hazel sighed. Captain, our problem is lack of manpower. How about we inform reliable captains about the case and include them? Ravager suggested. At this point, the credit isn't worth fighting this all by ourselves when we have the inspector trying to sabotage us. Your idea is good, but it's not the best. Captain Charleston shook his head. Not everyone is like me, who will dare ignore an order from a superior. I have no interest in begging anyone to help out. Captain Charleston had a great sense of justice and honor, which was one of the main reasons he was still committed to this even after all of this. But the same couldn't be uttered about the majority of the captains. Some couldn't care less and wanted nothing but to increase their ranks, and some would rather avoid putting themselves in such a sticky position with the higher UPS. How about an external help? Felix offered. I have been working under Miss Sani's bureau and she is an amazing detective. We can outsource her bureau and I am certain her expertise will come in handy. Miss Sani. Captain Charleston thought about it carefully. Felix always wanted to add Miss Sani to this case, so she could introduce the fallen organization's information to the squad without needing him. If he brought it out on his own, it would seem like he was gunning at them from the start, and Felix didn't want to leave such an impression since it would seem somewhat of a personal agenda. I disagree, that crazy witch will bring more mess than help. Hazel was the first to reject. She has a sort of a bad reputation and I believe most of her proof will come illegally, which is useless to us. Nidam supported. Captain Charleston listened to their inputs and remained silent for a couple of minutes. After arriving at the office, he turned around and ordered Felix, contact her in private and set up a hiring deal. At this point, we can use some shady investigators when dealing with traitors. On it. Felix nodded. 1468. A new target. A new opportunity. Meanwhile, Miss Sani was seen chilling on the balcony with a bag of golden crystals in her arm, counting each one with a relaxed expression. Money sure is nice. She murmured while watching the sunset. VRRRRR. Suddenly, her device vibrated. When she saw the caller's identity, a wide grin broke on her face. It's about time. Half an hour later, Miss Sani entered the premises of the law enforcement department while wearing a consultant badge, allowing her limited access to the building. Felix was leading her to the office after striking a swift recruitment deal. Both of them already discussed the details before it even happened, so it didn't take much time. After arriving at the office and a couple of pleasantries between her and the squad, they got straight into the heart of the issue. I believe Traveler has already updated you on the situation. Captain Charleston requested. Your intake on the matter is highly needed. First of all, the details of the case resembled greatly one of mine. What do you mean? Miss Sani took a deep breath and began narrating everything related to the fallen Spectre's organization, leaving them at the end with widened pupils and hearts beating rapidly in agitation. Erasing memories is nothing but a side effect. The real crime is the fact those fallen specters can't get kicked out of the heavenly plane even if their brightness score reached 0. Captain Charleston tightened his fists. No wonder things are kept secret for such a long time. Many spirits must have accepted the transformation process willingly due to their desperation, having no clue that they would live their lives akin to obedient machines. If those spirits were kidnapped, there were bound to be missing alerts or such in due time. But, when they were willingly giving themselves off, how could the law enforcers know or interfere? It's much worse than that. Miss Sani shared, I believe a powerful nobleman is the head of the entire organization. I don't know his purpose yet, but it can't be good. A noble, only governmental officers above wardens in authority were able to purchase enough territory to be called a noble. Hazel took a deep breath, so, the inspector isn't even the end boss. The Fallen Spectres organization is believed to have existed for decades now, and for it to remain secret for such a long time only implies a deep connection with all sectors of the government, not just the law enforcement department. Miss Sani informed. Do you have information about the identities of those entities? Captain Charlson asked. Not a clue. Miss Sani shook her head, they are hidden way too deep. If what you are saying is right, then no one from the government can be trusted with such information, Nidam said with a stern expression. That's self-explanatory. Everyone seemed more serious than ever as this scenario made them feel like they were going against the government instead of an organization. It was way scarier to be the enemy of the government with the kind of authority it possessed. Enough stressing over this. Let's do what we can and the rest will be covered by itself. Captain Charlson said, for now, I will take care of the gang's case with Hazel while the rest of you return to working on the past victims' backgrounds. We need any leads we get now that Quillen is out. Captain Charlson was certain that there would be more similar cases falling over his lap the moment he concluded this one to keep him away from touching the cellar. So, he could only give up on him for now and focus on other leads. I think I have a lead. Suddenly, Ravager spoke up with a suppressed tone. His fists were tightened and his expression didn't seem too well. When everyone noticed this, they remained silent and waited for him to speak. Instead, Ravager used his crystal device to show a holographic image of a young woman with strikingly familiar features. Her eyes, however, were vacant, devoid of the spark that typically characterized living spirits. This, Ravager began, his voice slightly quivering, is Massia. He paused, collecting himself before continuing, my sister. A murmur of surprise rippled across the room. None had known about this part of Ravager's past. She disappeared years ago after our separation, and ever since then I have been trying to find her. Ravager continued, it didn't take me long to find out that she was a servant under Attakus. I approached him for a trade, but he struck a deal with me to win him the Heavenly Plains tournament to hand her over. I worked my ass off to make it happen. Ravager clenched his fist, anger apparent in his eyes, and when I did it, he handed me this unrecognizable version of my little sister. No wonder. It all clicked in Felix's mind after hearing Ravager's side of the story. He always had a feeling that Ravager was hiding something, but he didn't think it would be like this. Captain Charlson leaned forward, and you believe she's fallen? Ravager nodded, I do. The symptoms match. The memory loss, the vacant look, the absolute obedience. It's all there. The room fell silent as the gravity of Ravager's revelation settled in. Here they were, investigating the fallen, and one of their own had a deeply personal connection to the case. I know that the protocol is to put me aside from the case due to my personal involvement, but I beg you to use me. Ravager said with a fire burning in his eyes, I will not rest until the perpetrators serve justice, and Attakus is merely the start. Captain Charlson remained silent for a moment. Then, he sighed, first of all, I am deeply sorry for what happened to your little sister. I believe that if it wasn't for our desperation to find a lead, you wouldn't have opened up. So, I will keep you around, but you must give me your word that you won't let your emotions get the best of you. We can't afford to make mistakes. I am more involved in this than anyone, so don't worry. Ravager uttered coldly, I will never do anything to jeopardize the case. Good. Captain Charlson's expression suddenly switched to solemn. Thanks to you, we have a new target. Attakus is considered a powerful businessman in the city, and he has a decent network and connections with the government. So, it won't be easy to find a lead through him. Soon, he smirked coldly, fortunately, just like any other businessman, He has many shady illegal deals and we just need to use them to our advantage. If we manage to succeed, he will most definitely give us a big name in the corrupted spirits organization, as there is no way he will be treated in the same manner as other buyers, Nidam added. Exactly. So, the plan for now is simple. Captain Charleston ordered, me and Hazel will handle the gang and other new cases thrown at us while you guys try your best to find a way to make Attakus cough up his seller's identity. As long as we catch a single seller, the entire organization will fall apart akin to dominoes. Captain Charleston uttered, his eyes filled with conviction. There was a reason why Inspector Nolver and his people were worried about Quillen falling into their hands. The law enforcement department had plenty of ways to extract information from criminals, and not even Inspector Nolver could stop them from doing their job if they caught one. Move out. 1469 Setting up a trap. A couple of weeks later, the squad stayed true to the plan and worked their best to fulfill their duties. Captain Charleston and Hazel focused on interrogating the captured gang members with extreme methods to obtain information about the other members' whereabouts. Fortunately, the leader was caught, which made the case much easier to conclude. They struck a swift deal with him, promising him jail time instead of getting kicked out of the plane if he gave out on his people. He took the plea deal in a heartbeat, as he wasn't loyal enough to throw himself off the heavenly plane for the sake of other people. If it wasn't for Captain Charleston wanting to end the case swiftly, he would have never given out such a sweet deal and would rather kick everyone out. After the rest of the gang members were captured across the entire heavenly plane, the case was considered concluded. Alas, before they could even celebrate, Inspector Nolver appointed a new emergency case related to another gang, using Captain Charleston's efficiency and competence in solving the past case to his advantage. Captain Charleston was forced to take it against his will and continue wasting time on things unrelated to the fallen specters. Meanwhile, Felix, Miss Sani, and the rest were struggling immensely to find dirt on Mr. Attakus. They spent weeks, using whatever means necessary to expose any shady deal he was up to, but to no avail. They refused to make any contact with him until they got something concrete and damaging, so he wouldn't alert the organization about their target. Finding his dirt illegally can be achieved through my network and a considerable sum of money, but it won't do us any good. Miss Sani sighed. She was seen hanging in her own office while having a holographic screen of Felix and the others in front of her. They decided to limit their real-time meetings to avoid the all-seeing eyes of Inspector Nolver. They're bound to be something we can find through legal channels. Ravager said coldly, that bastard has many different businesses across the entire city. He can't maintain such a large empire without getting his hands dirty. I think we should set him up. Nidam suggested, no matter how much we dig, there will be no water to be found. We have to make him lead us to the water source, then we can dig. It's a good idea, but how about its execution? Miss Sani shook her head. Attakus isn't dumb to fall for a trap. He is extremely intelligent and will smell bullshit from a mile away. Everyone nodded in agreement and remained silent, seemingly each thinking of a way to make it work. Felix turned to glance at Miss Sani and asked, I heard rumors that Attakus has forced many landowners to sell their territories to him at a cheap price for the sake of his beasts/animals husbandry business. Is it true? I don't have evidence to prove it, but I am certain he has done this before and still doing it in the shadows to expand his main business. Miss Sani replied. Mr. Attakus had a large business empire that revolved mostly around his animals/beasts husbandry company. He possessed hundreds of farms across the entire heavenly plane and provided all sorts of dairy, plant, and meat products. He also sold beasts and animals in bulk to other companies. To expand such a business, land was a main priority. Alas, it wasn't an easy task to obtain good pieces of plot that weren't already claimed. Hence, Mr. Attakus must rely on treacherous methods to obtain such territories, and there was no way his current empire would be this massive without him doing so. Knowing his greed, if we dangled a piece of territory before him, he wouldn't hesitate to make a move. Ravager expressed. My thoughts exactly. Felix nodded. That's all fine and well, but how will we get a piece of land to set up the trap? Nidam smiled wryly. If even Mr. Attakus was having trouble with such an issue, how could they even imagine purchasing one? We don't need to buy one, we just need to act like we own it for the sake of the trap. Felix said indifferently, I know someone who will lend us a small piece of land with no questions asked. Who? Everyone was left surprised and couldn't help but want to know the person's identity. Too bad, Felix didn't bother entertaining their curiosity. Just find me a trusted and unknown businessman from another city. Felix said, Mr. Attakus must not know him, but at the same time, he should feel comfortable to bully him. Smart, you want to put the land under his name, so when Attakus runs his background check, he won't be suspicious of anything. Miss Sani said. Felix nodded and then added, we just need either him or his subordinate to be caught in the process of land usurping. Whether the deal went through or not, it won't matter much. In this manner, Felix could get a piece of land for the setup and not lose it in the process. I don't know how you will get the land, but we are ready to help with anything. Nidam approved of the plan. In the absence of the captain, he was responsible for the decisions taken. I will contact you when I secure the land, and finish the rest of the preparations. Felix said calmly, we only have one chance to sell this, let's not screw it up. With that being said, Felix left the meeting and reached out to Elder Kraken. The moment the call was picked up, Felix went straight to the point and requested, Elder, I have a favor to ask. Shoot. Elder Kraken replied causally. I need a small piece of the plot away from the capital that isn't publicly registered under your name. Felix informed me, I will be using it for a case and will return it later on. I don't know what your preference is, so choose one from the list. Elder Kraken didn't ask Felix too many questions about the case and straightaway agreed to help him. After he sent the list of territories under his name, Felix's eyelids couldn't help but twitch. He sure is loaded. There were so many pieces of plot to count and they were spread across the entire heavenly plane. Some seemed useful and rich with resources, and some were like barren lands after a hot summer. The most shocking part? The ones on the list were private properties and no one was able to know the owner's identity. This will do just fine. After a few minutes of analyzing many great pieces of plot, Felix picked one with lush forests and great flat green surfaces, which were perfect for farms. He made sure that the plot wasn't too massive, so Mr. Attakus wouldn't be suspicious that a small businessman could own it. Then, he thanked Elder Kraken and returned with the news to the squad to start their preparation. A few days later, inside Mr. Attakus' office. Seated behind a heavy wooden desk, Attakus was reviewing some documents when his assistant entered the room. Sir, he began cautiously, I thought you should be informed immediately. A piece of land, quite important in potential, near the City of Hope, has just been purchased. Attakus's eyes darted up, interest piqued. Oh? And who is the fortunate owner? A businessman named Jonathan. He's new to the scene but seems to have deep pockets. Attakus leaned back, steepling his fingers, the allure of a new piece of land was too tantalizing to ignore. Do we have any information on this Jonathan? The assistant handed over a file. Not much. But initial observations suggest he's a genuine businessman whose main business is to flip land, houses, and other assets. Mr. Attakus perused through the file, absorbing every detail. Jonathan. He mused, we'll have to arrange a meeting. If he's inexperienced, we might be able to make a advantageous deal. The aide nodded, noting the aggressive glint in Attakus's eyes. I'll see to it right away. 1470 A devious tactic. The next morning. In a lavish lounge with golden lighting and a soft interior, Jonathan and Mr. Attakus were seen sitting at a mahogany table. The serene view of the City of Hope outside the window only added to the ambience. Jonathan, dressed in a crisp white suit, sat on one end of a mahogany table, a relaxed smile playing on his lips. Opposite him, Mr. Attakus, always impeccable in his dark tailored suit, had a steely glint in his eyes. "Mr. Jonathan," Mr. Attakus began smoothly, "I've heard a lot about your recent acquisition near Hope. It's prime land, perfect for development." Jonathan took a sip from his wine glass, nodding appreciatively. "Yes, it's a beautiful piece of land. I've had my eye on it for a while." Attakus leaned forward, the weight of his presence pressing down on the table. "I'm prepared to offer you a generous sum for it. Think of the profit you'd make." Jonathan chuckled, "It's not about the money, Mr. Attakus. I've done well for myself, and that plot is where I plan to retire." Unfazed, Mr. Attakus tried another angle. "How about a partnership then? You will receive royalties from anything produced on your land." Jonathan shook his head, still smiling. "I appreciate the offer, but it's a personal project. That land means more to me than just profit. Name your price." "Everyone has one." Jonathan leaned back, locking eyes with Attakus. "Some things, Mr. Attakus, are priceless. And for me, that plot of land is one of them." "Is that so?" Mr. Attakus' soft attitude began to disparate, his eyes became colder as he stared at Jonathan. As a businessman, he would never consider using illegal methods if the legal path could lead to the same results. But now? There was a tense silence, the air thick with unsaid words and power dynamics. Finally, Mr. Attakus let out a sigh, nodding in acknowledgement. "Very well, Mr. Jonathan. I respect your decision." Standing up, Mr. Attakus extended his hand, which Jonathan shook firmly. "Thank you for your time," Mr. Attakus said, his tone gracious but with an undertone of finality. As Mr. Attakus left the lounge, Jonathan watched him, wondering if he really had given up on the plot of land. "Good work." Felix complimented Jonathan, he had watched and heard their entire discussion from a far distance. "Sir, he doesn't seem like he has any plans to snatch it forcefully," Jonathan said. "If you were seeing his face now, you wouldn't think the same," Felix replied, his eyes affixed on Mr. Attakus, who entered his hovercar with an icy expression. Felix was right in his assumption. As the moment Mr. Attakus stepped inside the car, he reached out to his assistant and sneered. "He said he wanted to retire in it, let's see if he will have the same thought later on. What approach should I use? Make it barren. Consider it done." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a reddish orange hue over the sprawling expanse of Jonathan's temporary land. Vibrant greenery stretched as far as the eye could see, with birdsong filling the air. Near the boundary, a sleek black vehicle approached discreetly, stopping just out of view. From it emerged Mr. Attakus' assistant, holding a metallic briefcase and having his face hidden. He was tall, thin, and had an air of quiet efficiency. Dressed in all black, he blended with the shadows. He snapped his fingers twice and a pack of crow-like blackbirds emerged from the back of the car. They kept hovering above his head, seemingly scanning the new unfamiliar territory. Opening the briefcase, the assistant took out several small vials filled with a dark, viscous liquid. He glanced around, ensuring he was alone, and then he poured the vials inside automatic sprayers before attaching them to the bird's ankles. It took him more than 15 minutes to finish the process. When he was done, he made a weird-sounding whistle and the birds immediately spread out across the entire forest. The automatic sprayers were activated the moment the birds toggled into the depths of the forest, spraying the toxic substance over the fertile land. Wherever the poison landed, the life force seemed to drain away instantly. Plants wilted, turning grey and brittle, birds and small animals fled, sensing the imminent danger, and the ground itself became hard and cracked. Based on the territory's size, it should take half a day. The assistant timed his watch on his device and leaned against the car, waiting patiently for the birds to finish the job. Unbeknownst to the assistant, everything was being watched and recorded by Nidam as he was using his shadow abilities to hide himself from detection. Don't they want the land to be luscious for the sake of their farms? How can they do this? Ravager said with a solemn tone as he watched the live feed from Nidam's device. My best bet is that they have the antidote to the poison, Felix remarked. How devious, poisoning other people's lands, forcing them to sell them cheaply. Miss Sani said coldly, since no one wants to buy a barren land, Mr. Attakus will be the sole party interested in buying it and he can lowball the price as much as his heart desires. Devious indeed. It was truly the perfect plan as long as the assistant never stepped inside the private land. Right now, he was more or less a few meters outside of the territory, which made sure that Jonathan wouldn't be alerted at his intrusion. As for the birds, they were considered harmless animals. If it was beasts or big animals, they would be alarmed. Hours passed, and by dawn, a once verdant paradise had turned into a wasteland. The transformation was devastating, the desolation absolute. The assistant whistled again and the birds returned to him, accepting some treats as their reward before getting inside the car. Then, he dialed a number on his phone. The deed is done, sir, he reported coldly. Mr. Attakus responded from the other end, satisfaction evident in his voice. Excellent. Await further instructions. With that, the call ended, and the assistant went away. At this point, the deal was sealed in their eyes and it was only a matter of time before Jonathan reached out to them for a quick sell. How can they be this bold in their crimes? Jonathan expressed furiously. He had just received the news about what happened from Felix and even when the territory wasn't his own for real, he still couldn't help but show such reaction. It was understandable as he never knew that there were some diabolical businessmen to this degree living amidst them. As long as you understand the law, you can be bold as much as you would like. Miss Sani stated calmly. They knew that even if you reached out to the law enforcers, the only thing they would do is run a swift investigation before calling it an unfortunate natural cause. True, if they were assured in their poison's undetectability, they wouldn't have dared to use it. Nidam nodded. Since Mr. Attakus was so confident in their plan, it only meant that they had done this plenty of times before and they had never been caught or convicted. What's next then? We let them play their ploy and gather as much proof as possible. Felix uttered coldly, the tape isn't nearly enough to incriminate someone as prominent as him. 1471 caught red-handed. A couple of days later. Inside a plush private room of a high-end restaurant, the sounds of a string quartet playing softly could be heard. Crystal chandeliers hung above, casting a soft glow on the luxurious decor. Jonathan sat confidently, glaring across the marble top table at Mr. Attakus. Mr. Attakus, ever the picture of sophistication, poured himself a glass of wine from a bottle perched on the table, his fingers adorned with multiple gold rings. I trust you've reconsidered my offer, Mr. Attakus began, swirling the wine in his glass, a faint smug expression playing on his face. Jonathan's eyes flashed with anger. You think by destroying my land, you could force me into selling? You've got another thing coming, Attakus. That land means more to me than you can fathom. Even if every blade of grass on it withers, I won't sell it to the likes of you. Mr. Attakus leaned forward, his face inches from Jonathan's, the smile vanishing. First of all, I have done nothing to your land, so keep your false allegations to yourself. Secondly, I am merely here to do you a favor, not the other way around. You think anyone would want to get anywhere on your land in its current state? You must be out of your mind. He sneered. Jonathan leaned in as well, their faces almost touching. I know what you did. And I will make sure you pay for it. Pulling back, Mr. Attakus sighed, feigning disappointment. What a pity, Mr. Jonathan. I was hoping we could come to a mutually beneficial agreement. Beneficial. I will show you beneficial. Just you wait, I ain't dropping this. We will see about that. Mr. Attakus turned on his heel and left the restaurant, not wanting to waste any more of his breath. After he returned to his car, he reached out to his assistant again and updated him on the situation. Do we wait until his anger subsides? He will sell it sooner or later as he can't afford to pay taxes on a useless piece of land. The assistant said. I don't plan on staying here for long, so no. Mr. Attakus ordered coldly, release the beasts. The assistant remained quiet for a few moments, then, with a heavy breath, he replied. Consider it done. He wanted to talk him out of his decision, but he understood his boss' personality. Meanwhile, at a faraway distance, Felix could be seen sitting in a different cafe while having a journal covering his face. While he seemed engrossed in the news, in reality, his ears were zoned on the conversation between Mr. Attakus and his assistant. He had mastered the eavesdropping ability to the point that he could easily zone out all other noises and focus on a single vibrational sound wave across kilometers of distance. Release the beasts. How far is he planning to go? Felix frowned. He wasn't pleased in the slightest with the current development. After all, the plot of land belonged to Elder Kraken and the fact he allowed it to get poisoned was already rude on so many levels. Felix had no interest in letting beasts cause a mess as well. As for the reasoning, he figured out that if beasts invaded the land, it would force Jonathan to hand it over to the government until the situation was resolved. Mr. Attakus must definitely have contacts that would allow him to use a loophole and snatch the territory before Jonathan could claim it back. Not wanting to find out, he grouped up with his squad and they readied to make their move after the assistant brought the beasts to the territory. It was the best window to catch them red-handed in the act. Many days later, the night was draped in a cloak of darkness, broken only by the sliver of a crescent moon above. Along the border of Jonathan's land, an eerie silence hung in the air, but the faint, distant sounds of nocturnal creatures could be heard. Concealed behind thick shrubs, Felix and his squad waited in ambush. They were equipped with night vision goggles that gave the landscape an ethereal green glow. They have been camping here ever since Felix heard about the beast's invasion. Trusting that Mr. Attakus' assistant would have to come personally to oversee the operation, they set up an ambush in all directions. Soon, the soft crunch of gravel sounded from a distance. A moment later, the silhouette of a truck, barely visible in the dim light, approached the territory. The back of the truck was covered, but an occasional muffled growl or roar escaped from within, hinting at its dangerous cargo. As expected, Mr. Attakus' assistant stepped out from the driver's seat. He approached the back of the truck cautiously and began to unlock the doors. "Ready, team," Nida muttered telepathically. As the assistant swung the doors open, Nida emerged from the shadows with an authoritative shout, "Law enforcement! You're under arrest!" "How?" The assistant's face turned ashen as he realized he'd been caught in the act. He wasn't stupid to not assume that Jonathan might have prepared defensive measures in his territory after it was poisoned. So, he made his people keep an eye over him to see if he would go to the law enforcement office or hire a private security team. When he saw that nothing of such sort happened, he kicked off his plan in the depths of the night. Alas, he had no clue that they were being watched ever since they stepped inside the city. Go! In a desperate move, he slapped a button on a remote in his hand. Suddenly, alarms blared from the truck, and its rear doors flew open fully, releasing a horde of ethereal beasts that began to scatter in every direction. "Contain them!" Ravager yelled, hurling water nets toward the beasts. Even Nidam was forced to utilize his shadows to capture the approaching beasts in his direction. The assistant, seeing his chance amidst the chaos, tried to slip away but found his path blocked by Felix. "Not so fast!" Felix uttered unconcernedly as he used his overpowered telekinesis to pressure the assistant onto the floor. However, the assistant wasn't a nobody. He acted as if the pressure had gotten into him to lower Felix's guard, and when he noticed that Felix's tensed shoulders relaxed a bit, a hidden glint appeared in his eyes. Whoosh! He exploded from the ground in an instant and charged at Felix with his palms covered in sharp icy claws. The assault was so instantaneous, that the others barely managed to glance in their direction before noticing that the icy claw was a mere inch away from Felix's neck. Slice! In a fluid motion, he swung at Felix, leaving a thin gash along the curve of his neck. Crimson drops splashed onto the greyed plants, gleaming under the pale moonlight. The surrounding shadows seemed to stir with unrest, but Felix remained still, a smirk crossing his lips. Expected more from Attakus' right hand. With widened eyes, the assistant whispered with disbelief, No, you let me do that. Felix dabbed at his neck, observing the blood with a clinical detachment. Now, you're not just involved in land disputes. You've committed an attempt on a state official. Not even Attakus can save you. Before the assistant could react, Felix appeared behind him akin to a ghost, and struck him in the back of his head, sending a silent vibration wave that disrupted his brain waves and caused him to lose consciousness instantly. Traveler. As they watched Felix handcuff Mr. Attakus' assistant with a flood of blood dripping down his neck, every one of them felt a sudden chill course down their spine. His unsettling calmness in such a situation was too creepy even for them. 1472 Confronting Mr. Attakus. Some time later, Mr. Attakus received a sudden call while he was doing some cardio in bed with two green-skinned beauties. Must be him. He thought it was his assistant calling to inform him about the success of the mission. So, he pulled out his sword, causing one of the girls to release a lewd moan before walking fully nude towards his device, which was sitting on the counter. After seeing his assistant's name on the screen, he smiled faintly and picked up the call. How did it go? Were my babies well behaved? They were a bit rowdy, so we gave them a tranquilizer to quieten them down. Miss Sani's voice came from the other end of the call, causing Mr. Attakus' sword to go soft almost instantly. Who are you? He asked coldly. You will find out if you come to this location in the next half an hour alone. Oh, don't try anything silly, we have more than just your assistant. Peeb. The call was hung up immediately, leaving Mr. Attakus standing silently with his head lowered. The girls on the bed remained as quiet as mice, their blood going cold from fear. They knew that when Mr. Attakus lost his temper, he vented on anything or anyone near him. Fortunately for them, Mr. Attakus had no time to waste on his emotions. He suppressed whatever was within him and got himself clothed. Then, he took off towards the location given to him fearlessly. He acted like this only because the location was a public cafe in the city's center. Some time later, Mr. Attakus found himself in a private closed-off room with Miss Sani facing him. I had a feeling I recognized such an obnoxious voice, still, I didn't think it would be really you. Mr. Attakus said coldly. Kikiki, it's a pleasure to see you too. Miss Sani chuckled. Where is my assistant and why is he in your possession? He skipped straight to the crux of the problem. Your assistant is in quite a big mess. In fact, I can confidently say that he has put you in a much bigger mess than you can imagine. The moment Miss Sani finished her statement, she played the recordings of the assistant poisoning the land and attempting to release beasts on it. Mr. Attakus' heart skipped a beat after seeing his right-handed man getting caught red-handed carrying his deeds. Still, not an ounce of emotion was shown on his face. Why are you showing videos of a stranger? Mr. Attakus said calmly after noticing that his assistant was wearing a face cover. There is no use in acting smart and denying your relation to this. Miss Sani shook her head as she showed a new video of the assistant assaulting Felix. This time, his face was on full display. While Felix's face wasn't shown, his outfit was, causing Mr. Attakus' expression to turn ugly immediately. He understood the horrible consequences of assaulting a law enforcer and getting caught during it. Mr. Attakus had no clue that his assistant was baited by Felix, and during that exact moment, he really thought he had a chance of escaping their encirclement. This is all we need to make all the law enforcement departments across the realm join hands to investigate even the tiniest dirt particle under your fingernail. Miss Sani smiled. So, are you interested in a conversation now, or you will keep acting ignorant? After a few moments of silence, Mr. Attakus asked with an icy tone, what do you want? He knew that this must be unrelated to money since the law enforcers were involved and rarely did any of them accept bribes due to the massive risk involved. First, sign this. Miss Sani forwarded an NDA contract to ensure that their conversation would remain here. Mr. Attakus signed it after a quick read, also wanting to keep this situation as private as possible. Now listen. Miss Sani's smile faded away. We know about the Fallen Spectres organization and how you are one of their clients. Just as Mr. Attakus wanted to react, she placed a finger in front and said, don't bother denying it. We have Ravager's little sister under us and based on our investigations, she is a Fallen. We also know you have told Ravager that you bought her in her current condition, so you can't weasel your way out of this. Miss Sani leaned closer, her eyes as serious as ever. We don't want you, we want the seller you bought her from, and we are certain that a client as big as you are being handled by a bigger fish in the organization. After she finished her piece, she leaned back in her chair and waited for Mr. Attakus to process the information. Are they finally on to them? No wonder the negotiation was left to be handled by this witch. The law enforcers on the case want to keep their identities private until they are certain I am on their side. Mr. Attakus thought to himself with a deep frown. He understood that if he was met with a law enforcer, there was no way it could be in a private setting like this. It was illegal and he could even sue the law enforcer for it, causing their entire case to collapse. So, Miss Sani was used as the lead in such illegal activities, and thankfully, she was more than dependable. Did Ravager sell me out for the sake of revenge, or he is actively participating in the case? Right now, Mr. Attakus was certain about one thing, and that was Ravager's involvement. After all, he was the only one who knew about the fallen spectre under him besides his servants. He sure came for revenge sooner than anticipated. Mr. Attakus showed an irked expression. He believed that Ravager would have no way to get him since he did everything by the book. Alas, he didn't consider that he would team up with Felix, who was involved heavily in the Fallen Spectre's case, which allowed him to make the connection. What's your response? Will it be you and your empire that you have worked insanely hard for, or some seller in a criminal organization? Miss Sani pressured him after seeing that he remained silent for too long. The answer is me, and always will be me. Mr. Attakus sneered, but that doesn't mean I will hand over the seller on a silver platter. You fools have no clue what you are messing with and the grim consequences awaiting you if you dared go any further. We want a name and a witness confession, not a warning. Miss Sani said calmly, are you with us or not? It's your funeral. Mr. Attakus shrugged, put me on the witness protection program and I am all yours. Mr. Attakus had no plans to risk the fall of his business empire over protecting the Fallen Spectre's organization. If only the evidence against him was little, he might have taken a chance, but with the videos in their hands? He wasn't that foolish. By the way, did Ravager agree to this? Mr. Attakus showed a mocking smile. That's none of your concern. Miss Sani presented an already signed agreement by Captain Charleston to Mr. Attakus. He laughed in amusement and glanced at the contract details. When he saw that all the terms would ensure that nothing would happen to both his business and life if he voided any previous binding to assist with this case, he signed it immediately. With that, he also ensured that not even Ravager could get to him through anything related to this case, which was the reason he asked for his confirmation. The moment the contract was signed, Felix and the rest of the squad entered the private room wearing casual clothes. Will you look at that? I was just asking about you. Mr. Attakus smiled the moment his eyes landed on Ravager. Ravager gave him a deadly look for a moment before his expression returned to normal, refusing to get triggered. He knew that the instant he allowed his personal feelings to get in the way of investigation, he would be taken off instantly. Which was the reason he hadn't said anything about offering witness protection to Mr. Attakus, even though it made him sick to his stomach. Tell us what we need to know or refrain from opening your filthy mouth again. Nida muttered coldly while lighting up a cigarette, not caring about the no smoking sign in the room. With Mr. Attakus being in their program, they were putting their entire career in his hands, and if the information in his possession wasn't useful, it wouldn't end well for them. So, he was a bit on the edge. I doubt any of you can handle what I know, but screw it. Mr. Attakus leaned in with a solemn expression and said, your objective is none other than the public's favorite politician, the Dark Spirits Warden, Shaikh. It can't be. Felix's pulse skipped a beat the instant he heard the name. He was the one presenting me to the fallen spectres and offering for sale me this moron's little sister. 1473 A night raid. Ravager, Miss Sani, and Nidam's expressions were a mix of shock, disbelief, and anger. Ravager clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. I always respected him for the work he does for the low-class spirits, but this? He's a warden, for heaven's sake. He's supposed to protect the citizens, not be a part of its underbelly. Nidam shook his head in dismay. I have interacted with him so many times and even attended his seminars. It's hard to believe someone you've looked up to can be this corrupted. Miss Sani's eyes flickered with anger, their usual calm replaced by a storm. I knew that the organization had a far reach in the government, but this is getting ridiculous. This makes our job so much harder, considering the influence he has. Felix leaned against the table, rubbing his temples. His thought process was vastly different than theirs. Elder Carbuncle, is this why you wanted me to become a law enforcer? Is this why you said that I need to be careful? Felix understood that Carbuncle had eyes all over the place, watching and documenting everything since the day he had gotten his scribe's title. He figured that he watched his wife get abused or something, but now, he started to realize that the situation must be much worse than that. It can't be that his wife has been turned into a fallen spectre. When he recalled how fallen spectres become after the transformation, he couldn't imagine how was Carbuncle still holding his sanity. I know, shocking right? Mr. Attakus continued on, but when I studied the scale of the organization, I realized that he is still a mere member and the leader must be someone above him in rank. So, you are still interested in taking them down? We already knew about that. Stop trying to discourage us and spit everything you discussed with Shaikh. Nidam ordered with a stern tone, don't miss a single detail, everything will be used in court when we bring him in. Fine. Mr. Attakus shrugged and began narrating. He approached me at a party many years ago and told me that he had noticed my lack of trusted servants to continue my empire's expansion. So, he introduced me to the perfect product. Fallen spectres. They don't need lumus, significance, they never pose a risk of being banished. They're obedient, almost robotically so. It's like their will has been stripped away. And the best part, Mr. Attakus added with a somewhat excited tone, they don't register in the system. So you can have as many as you want, bypassing the servant limit. The last line alone was enough to make them understand that many companies would do everything in their power to buy them in bulk. After all, there was no such thing as a free agent in the spirit realm. If you want to work for someone, you have to be his servant or the servant of his servant. In this manner, all spirits would be connected one way or another and run their tasks with the law on their side. But, the fallen spectres were outside of the equation since they had no desire to protect their rights by becoming a legitimate servant. In other words, as long as their needs were met, they were the perfect workers. I knew it was too good to be true, so I told him to give me just one for a trial run. Mr. Attakus chuckled as he glanced at Ravager. You know who it was? Knowing your nature, after the trial run, you must have wanted to buy more. Miss Sani changed the subject quickly. I assume you reached out to Shaikh and set up a deal. Indeed, I have purchased an additional 10 from him months ago. Mr. Attakus confessed truthfully. Since he was in the witness protection program, it meant that he had already betrayed the Fallen Spectres organization. Instead of playing both sides and withholding information, it was best to do everything in his power to take them down. In this way, he wouldn't have them as enemies later on if the case fell through and they survived it. As for his crimes, he was protected from everything related to this case the moment he became a main witness. Do you have any proof for the sale going through? Miss Sani asked. Of course, I have the transactions in paper and even video recordings showing the deals going through, plus the delivery of the fallen specters by Sharky's people. Mr. Attakus smiled, I have everything to take him down. I will be honestly astonished if you botched the case. Just give us everything and be ready when we call you to testify in the court. Nidam said coldly, we will handle the rest. I wish you all the luck in the realm. Mr. Attakus stood up as he affixed his suit, planning to take his leave. When he arrived at the door, Ravager blocked him and leaned closer to his ear. Then, he whispered with a suppressed tone. Sooner or later, you will cast into the depth of the spirit realm to wander for eternity, I will make sure of it. Good luck to you too. Mr. Attakus laughed in amusement and walked away, not too bothered by his threat. Just as he was about to leave the room, he reminded them. I expect my assistant to be in my office by the end of the day. With that, he took off. Felix and the others glanced at each other for a moment before Nidam spoke. We have our main witness and even evidence enough to put Sharky away for a long time. Let's not mess it up and bring the whole organization down with him. Everyone nodded in understanding with serious expressions. The exposure of Sharky made them understand that the organization might have many more governmental officials hidden. If they wanted this to be considered as a real win, all of them needed to be weeded out. As for Mr. Attakus, they weren't worried about him ratting them to the organization or giving them false information. If the fallen organization was scary, the law enforcement department was 100 times scarier. Any smart man would rather screw anyone but them. A couple of days later, near Sharky's mansion in the northern district. The moonlight bathed the grand estate in a cold, silvery glow. As the clock tower chimed midnight, shadows began to move in synchrony, advancing towards Sharky's mansion. The mansion, known for its magnificence and opulence, now stood as the lair of a criminal. Captain Charleson's squad, cloaked in the night, moved swiftly and silently. They formed a perimeter around the estate, ensuring no escape. With a nod from Captain Charleson, Felix walked to the grand entrance and blew it wide open with a single vibratory punch. Law enforcement. Everyone is under arrest. Don't not resist. I repeat, do not resist. As the dust settled, Captain Charleson shouted as he stormed in with his team, their presence announcing an impending doom for those inside. Law enforcers. We are being raided. Call the master. The servants and guards were thrown into utter confusion at the sudden raid, having absolutely no idea how to behave or react. The guards were taught to protect the estate from invaders, but these weren't any invaders, making them understand that if they dared resist or harm a law enforcer, their judgment would be separated from their master. Still, some of them decided to make a run for it out of fear. Lights flashed as Hazel and the others summoned ethereal chains, securing any servant or subordinate who dared to not comply. The scene inside was chaotic, servants in their night robes, confused and frightened, subordinates reaching for hidden weapons only to be frozen at the consequences of retaliation. What's with this ruckus? Sharky roused from his sleep with a muddled look and stepped out of his room in an elegant night robe. His face, usually composed, displayed a hint of surprise and anger at the sight of his people getting arrested in the heart of his territory. What's the significance of this? He bellowed as Felix and Ravager moved to restrain him. Captain Charleson stepped forward, his demeanor stern. Sharky, you are under arrest for trafficking spirits, unlawful alteration of their physical and ethereal forms, and countless other crimes. Sharky's eyes widened in disbelief, attempting to shake off the hands on him. You can't be serious. I insist upon an explanation. Ravager, holding a stack of evidence, tossed it onto a table nearby. Photographs, documents, and transcripts from covered operations spread out. There's your explanation, he sneered coldly. 1474 wickedness and evil even in the afterlife. Sharky was left stunned at the amount of evidence in their possession. While he couldn't read everything, he saw that many of the shown evidence were heavily related to Mr. Attakus. This. Save it for the court. Captain Charleston interrupted him and put his hands in handcuffs behind his back. As the squad prepared to leave, the weight of the situation seemed to hit Sharkey. The powerful and respected warden was now just another criminal in chains. He looked at Captain Charleston, anger and confusion evident in his eyes. "You'll regret this, Charleston. Trust me, you will regret this." Captain Charleston met his gaze, unwavering. "Justice always finds its way, and if I have wronged you, I am ready to accept the punishment." "Had wronged him? You are too soft, Captain. With what we know, he deserves to be buried 10 meters under a wasteland." Hazel sneered in disgust as she pushed Sharkey forward, almost causing him to trip. Sharkey merely gave her a deathly glare and remained silent, knowing that nothing he said or did at the moment was going to help him. Unfortunately, he couldn't even reach out to the other top heads for assistance. His device had been confiscated and he was too far for a telepathic conversation. "Clear out the entire mansion, I will escort the captured back to the department," Captain Charleston ordered. Felix and the others nodded in understanding and spread out using their ethereal forms, allowing them to move through surfaces. "I will take downstairs," Felix said after picking up vibrational energies deep underground. When Sharkey turned around and saw Felix disappearing through the ground, his expression couldn't help but turn ugly. IMF***ed. The fact that he was arrested meant that a judge had approved of an arrest warrant after seeing the evidence stacked against him. But, to approve a search warrant was much more strict, and this made him understand the evidence in their ownership must be pretty damning. With his mansion being searched, it was only going to get worse for him. "Where is she?" Felix frowned as he searched for Carbuncle's wife. He prioritized her more than anything at the moment, and ever since he stepped into the mansion, he was searching for her. Right now, he was walking down a long twisted flight of stairs, which seemed to be heading into the depth of an abyss. Descending the stone steps, Felix felt a chilling draft that seemed to intensify with each step, as if the air was thick with despair. The chaotic intense vibrational waves coming from below didn't make him feel any better about this exploration. Soon, he found himself at the bottom with a wooden gate closed shut. Felix went through it with his guard raised to the limit. When he saw a dim corridor on the other side, he ventured deeper and deeper. Suddenly, the faint sound of whimpering reached his ears the closer he got to the end of the corridor. When he turned a corner, Felix was met with a gruesome sight, a vast hall, with walls lined with chains and shackles, each holding a spirit. Machines, tubes, and strange devices were connected to each spirit, extracting their energies into dark crystals that pulsated with a foreboding glow. The floor beneath them was stained with ethereal blood and tears. Felix's heart pounded loudly as anger boiled inside him. He had no idea what he was looking at, but he didn't like it one bit. Even his cold heart was starting to get heated from rage the more he watched those spirits get utterly tortured. "Help me, it hurts, sob, please, help. I can't stand it any longer, officer, hell." When the nearest spirits saw Felix's outfit and realized that he was a law enforcer, a spark of hope emerged in their bloodshot eyes. Some begged with tears flooding down their cheeks, and some gave him a mere pleading look, either too exhausted to speak or had their tongues pierced by metal spikes. The sight was absolutely horrendous, and Felix never expected in his life to see such wickedness and evil in the afterlife. "I will free you all. Hang in there." Felix's unconcerned voice wasn't pleasant to the ears at all, but at this instant, all the spirits who heard it felt like it was the most angelic melodious voice they had ever heard. Whoosh! Whoosh! He swiftly moved through the dungeon, using a flaming blade to cut the chains and free each spirit. He placed them gently on the ground and gave them medication pills to enhance their recovery. Some were too weak to stand, and others clung to him like toddlers holding onto their mothers for safety and protection. "I won't leave you, just close your eyes and take a rest," Felix promised softly as he caressed their hands until exhaustion finally got into them. "Guys, request for reinforcement immediately and come down here." Felix said coldly as he continued freeing the spirits. What did you find? Ravager asked. A dungeon full of tortured spirits. Felix reported indifferently, not softening the blow even a bit. His squad mates' hearts chilled akin to being thrown into a bucket of ice. Knowing Felix's non-playful personality made them understand that he wasn't joking with them. On our way. Without waiting for their arrival, Felix continued moving further in his save mission. Suddenly, his feet froze in their place after spotting a familiar face in the corner of his eyes. Stunned, he slowly turned his head until he was faced with a chained and beaten-up small creature reminiscent of a humanoid hamster, covered in soft fur that had turned filthy and matted from neglect. A large, once radiant, gem rested on her forehead, but it now looked dull, clouded by the pain and suffering she had endured. Two shimmering, crystalline wings extended from her back, though they were no longer their usual radiant hue. Instead, they were fractured in places, with edges chipped and splintered. Carbuncle's wife. Felix kept staring at her without a single blink. His mind went blank at the horrific thought that his elder watched his wife getting tortured at the hands of Sharky without the ability to save her. Elder. He glanced up, his eyes as cold as ever, but the look he was giving was full of sorrow and sympathy. He had a feeling that Elder Carbuncle was watching him and his assumption was correct. Carbuncle stood in his dim office, staring intently into a large, ornate spiritual mirror. The surface of the mirror shimmered like liquid silver, and within its depths, the scene of Felix discovering his wife in Sharky's dungeon played out. The soft glow from the mirror illuminated Carbuncle's face, which was an amalgamation of contradictory emotions. His large eyes, usually twinkling with joy and mirth, were now clouded with pain. They welled up with tears, but not a single drop spilled, reflecting his determination to remain composed. His whiskers drooped in sadness. Yet, amidst this profound sadness, there was a gentleness in his gaze, a hallmark of his ever-present kindness. Even in this moment of deep personal anguish, he didn't let the darkness take away his inherent warmth. Bring her home, son. Bring her home. Carbuncle murmured as he watched Felix approach her, offering words of comfort and comfort. The sight of his dear junior taking care of his wife filled Carbuncle's heart with gratitude. Carbuncle's wife looked up as Felix approached, her eyes red and swollen, filled with both fear and hope. A pained smile tugged at her lips, realizing that her suffering and anguish were finally going to be put to an end. Seeing her in this state, Felix felt a surge of anger and desolation, a powerful mix that made him clench his fists. It will be all right. No one is ever going to hurt you again, no one. He moved closer, whispering promises of save and retribution, knowing that the moment she reunited with her husband, no one would dare lay a finger on her again. When Carbuncle saw that Felix had fed her medicine and put her to sleep after covering her body, he closed his eyes for a short moment. Then, he whispered softly, "Thank you, little one, thank you." 1475 A deeper level to the case. A few moments later, Nidam and Ravager, stepping through the doorway, halted for a moment, allowing their eyes to adjust to the dimness. The cold stone underfoot, slick with moisture, sent shivers up their spines. But it wasn't just the chilling atmosphere that made them uneasy, it was the sight before them. Rows upon rows of spirits lay on the ground, their bodies battered and bruised, their chains clinking softly with each ragged breath they took. Some seemed barely conscious, while others looked like they had fallen into a coma. The stench of despair hung heavily in the air. It's real. Ravager's fists clenched so hard that his knuckles turned white. Every ounce of him trembled with rage, and his eyes, normally a calm sea, were now stormy and filled with fire. This is monstrous," he growled, his voice echoing through the chamber. Even when he was already informed and prepared himself for a mental shock, he never imagined it would be this horrible. Nidam, usually the more composed of the two, felt a similar surge of anger. His jaw set tight, eyes narrowing into slits. The aura around him darkened as a crimson glow emanated from his being, a visible sign of his boiling fury. How could someone do this? What's the goal here? Even if there is a goal, how can anything be worth putting already dead spirits in such agony? He hissed. Most of them must have suffered in the living world and they suffer even in the afterlife. How can this be allowed? The last statement came out of Nidam's mouth with so much venom directed at no one but the god of the spirit realm, Lord Hades. Enough useless whining, no one will save them but us. Felix said indifferently as he carried Carbuncle's wife on his back. Pick up as many spirits as possible and let's bring them to the surface. As he flew upward, he channeled his telekinesis control to lift more than 20 spirits and then took them with him outside of the dungeon. Realizing that it wasn't the time to let their emotions run amok, Ravager and Nidam followed his lead, saving as many spirits as they could. After a few trips, no one was left in the dungeon and the mansion's biggest hall was packed with rows upon rows of slumbering wounded spirits. Hazel almost fainted from the horrifying sight, but she managed to catch herself for their sake. I am going back, Felix said. We need to investigate the machines and their purpose. I will go down with you. Ravager tagged in. Nidam gave them permission with a head nod and continued talking with the approaching reinforcement. He had requested a reinforcement directly from the headquarters. Since he used the enforced emergency call, no one could reject responding to the call unless the chief himself cancelled it. In a short while, a silhouette of a massive, gleaming airship with the emblem of the law enforcement department could be seen descending from the skies. As the ship landed, its bay doors opened, releasing teams of law enforcement officers, dressed in their pristine uniforms and bearing the insignia of their elite ranks. Alongside them, medics carrying emergency medical kits rushed out. The officers stormed Sharky's mansion with precision, entering through every door and window, ensuring every corner was checked. They were prepared for a battle, but what greeted them wasn't the resistance they had expected. Instead, they found that heart-wrenching scene. Captain Frederick, leading the operation, surveyed the scene, his face a mask of controlled fury. Medics! He shouted, waving his arm in a sweeping motion toward the spirits. The medical team moved swiftly, setting up emergency stations, and tending to the spirits. Soft, comforting words were spoken as medics tried to assure the spirits that they were safe now. They attended to their injuries, administered vital essences, and did their best to alleviate their pain. What the hell happened here? And where is Charles? Captain Rashford asked with a suppressed tone. Captain Quinton, Frederick, and the rest of their squad mates went straight to Nidam. Even when Nebula saw him and knew that this case was related to Felix and Ravager, she didn't let her competitive spirit run amok. The sight of the tortured spirits made her just as mad as everyone else, forgetting completely about anything related to their competition. Sirs, this is what happened. Nidam came forward and narrated their entire operation from A to Z, filling them with all the details related to the Fallen Spirits organization, Sharky's involvement, and so much more, to the point everyone began to question its legitimacy. Alas, the nightmarish sight before them supported Nidam's absurd claims. Captain Charlson has taken Sharky and his people to the station. While the rest of my team are inside the dungeon, continuing their investigations. Nidam finalized the report with a respectful salute. Captain Frederick had so many things he wanted to say, like why he hadn't been informed about this much sooner, how could this situation occur in the heart of the capital, and how Sharky get away with this for such a long time. In the end, he reached out with his hand and tapped Nidam on his shoulder. Good job, good job. Just doing our duties. Nidam gave him a slight head nod and went to assist the medics. Escort everyone back to the hospital if their conditions become stable. Captain Frederick ordered out loud. You guys, let's head downstairs. A couple minutes before the reinforcement arrival, Felix and Ravager were seen standing before one of the machines in the dungeon. Felix was smart to cut off only the chains and leave the machines in perfect conditions, so they could investigate them properly. I don't know why, but it makes me feel erratic and uncomfortable the closer I get to it. Ravager commented with a deep frown. It's detrimental energy. Felix said calmly while analyzing the machines. Unaffected by such an aura, he had experienced true evil energy against Lucifer, something much deadlier and abhorrent than this. What's this? When he approached the machine, he noticed a dark gemstone embedded in its back. It was the one releasing a black aura around the machine. As a precaution, he requested Ravager to cover his hand in water gloves, and he did as he was told. Be careful, Ravager warned. Felix reached out with his hand and extracted the jewel from the machine using force. After plucking it from the machine, it started peeping noisily, sounding an alarm. Ravager shut it down instantly with a single punch and focused back on Felix. What's wrong? He asked with knitted eyebrows after seeing Felix's stunned expression as he stared at the gemstone. Unresponsive, Felix's enlarged pupils reflected deep writings on the gemstone's surface, a writing with a language he could recognize from thousands of kilometers. A language that accompanied him his entire new life and was one of the reasons for his achievements. Universal Codex, why are there writings on the gemstone with Universal Codex? He exclaimed in utter shock, but no one was there to answer him. The writings appeared like this. XXXX, Spanther. He kept turning the stone over and over again until he managed to memorize all the letters on it. He knew that he had absolutely no clue what's the translation for those sentences, but he still memorized them to see if others matched. Traveler. With a slight push from Ravager, Felix woke up from his daze and replied. There are some weird writings on this, and I have no idea what they mean. Felix handed him the jewel and went to check the other gemstones. When he realized that all of them shared the same writings, he reached an uncertain conclusion. Are those enchantments to remove detrimental energy from spirits, like some sort of a spell? If so, how could anyone write enchantments with the Universal Codex in the spirit realm when even primogenitors in Asna struggle to understand them? Felix narrowed his eyes. Is this really just a simple case of turning spirits into slaves for profit?